Welcome, history enthusiasts, to a journey back in time, deep into the heart of Mesoamerica. We're setting our sights on the year 50 CE, a pivotal moment when a legendary civilization began to stir, marking the dawn of its golden age. This is the story of the Maya, and it all begins in a world of breathtaking contrasts and untamed beauty. Imagine a vast expanse stretching from the sun-drenched Yucatan Peninsula in the north, down through the dense, humid jungles of modern-day Guatemala and Belize, and descending into the cool, volcanic highlands to the south. This was the Maya world, a realm defined by its dramatic geography. In the lowlands, a seemingly endless canopy of green blankets the earth. Howler monkeys call from the treetops, elusive jaguars stalk the forest floor, and vibrant macaws paint the sky with color. The air here is thick with moisture, the heat is relentless, and life bursts from every corner. It's a world that is both incredibly bountiful and incredibly challenging. Beneath this emerald sea of jungle lies a secret. The ground is made of porous limestone, a landscape that swallows rainfall, leaving the surface with few rivers or lakes. Survival here depended on mastering the environment, on understanding the subtle rhythms of the rainy season and finding precious water sources in natural sinkholes, known as cenotes. These sacred wells were not just sources of water, they were portals to the underworld, central to Maya spirituality. It was in this challenging lowland environment that the greatest Maya cities would rise. Further south, the landscape transforms. The flat, steamy lowlands give way to rugged mountains and volcanic peaks. This is the Maya highlands. Here, the air is cooler, the soil is rich with volcanic ash, and precious resources like obsidian, jade, and basalt are found. The terrain is a maze of steep valleys and high plateaus, creating natural pockets of isolation. The communities that developed here were just as Maya as their lowland counterparts. But their world was shaped by different forces, different resources, and a different relationship with the land. This stark division between highlands and lowlands wasn't just geographical, it was cultural. It shaped everything from trade and warfare to identity. The lowlands, with their sprawling, interconnected territories, and the highlands, with their more isolated, defensible valleys, fostered distinct ways of life. Yet, they were not entirely separate. A complex network of trade routes, like veins and arteries, connected these regions. Jade and obsidian from the highlands traveled down to the lowlands, while exotic feathers, cacao, and salt from the coast made their way up into the mountains. This constant exchange of goods also meant an exchange of ideas, technologies, and beliefs, weaving a rich, complex tapestry of Maya culture. Around 250 CE, something extraordinary begins to happen in the lowlands. Out of the jungle, monumental structures start to reach for the sky. This is the birth of the classic period. Across the Patan Basin, communities that had existed for centuries began to transform into powerful, independent cities. We're not talking about a unified empire ruled by a single king. Instead, think of ancient Greece, a collection of powerful, competing cities like Athens and Sparta. For the Maya, these were cities like Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, and Copan. Each city-state was a kingdom unto itself, ruled by a divine king, a Kawalaja, who served as the intermediary between the mortal world and the gods. The heart of each city was its sacred precinct. Here, architects and laborers, with incredible skill and no metal tools, erected massive limestone pyramids. These weren't just tombs. Te were man-made sacred mountains, designed to bring the rulers closer to the heavens. Their steep stairways led to small temples at the summit, where priests and kings performed rituals essential to maintaining cosmic order. Imagine standing in the grand plaza of a nascent Tikal. All around you, the sounds of construction fill the air. Thousands of workers quarry massive limestone blocks, shaping them with flint and obsidian tools. They make slime mortars to bind the stones, and then cover the structures with brilliant white stucco, which was often painted in vibrant reds and blues. The city gleams like a jewel in the green jungle. You see intricately carved stone monuments, known as stelae, being erected. These aren't just decorations. They are historical records, celebrating the king's lineage, his military victories, and his divine right to rule. Scribes, with their sophisticated hieroglyphic writing, meticulously record these events, giving us a window into their world. The layout of these cities was no accident. It was a mirror of the Maya cosmos. The plazas, temples, and palaces were aligned with celestial events, the rising and setting of the sun, the movements of Venus, the position of the stars. The city itself was a living, breathing stage for religious ceremony and political theater. The ball courts, a feature of every major city, were not just for sport. The sacred ball game was a ritual of profound significance, often reenacting mythical struggles and sometimes culminating in sacrifice, a way to appease the gods and ensure the continuation of the world. Competition between these city-states was fierce. They vied for resources, for control of trade routes, and for prestige. Alliances were forged and just as quickly broken. Warfare was a constant reality, though it was often ritualistic, focused on capturing rival nobles for sacrifice rather than conquering and occupying territory. This constant state of competition fueled an incredible cultural fluorescence. Rulers tried to outdo one another, building taller temples, more elaborate palaces, and commissioning more beautiful works of art. T's rivalry, born from their geographical proximity yet political independence, was a primary engine of the classic Maya Golden Age. So, as we stand at the threshold of the classic period, we see a world awakening. From the misty highlands to the sweltering lowlands, a civilization is hitting its stride. The Maya have mastered their environment, developed one of the most sophisticated writing systems in the ancient world, and are building cities that will endure for centuries. They are astronomers, mathematicians, artists, and architects of the highest order. The stage is set for an era of unparalleled achievement, a story of divine kings, sprawling cities, and cosmic battles that will play out over the next 600 years. The Maya world has awakened, and its greatest chapter is just beginning. Thanks for joining us on this first step into the Maya world. If you enjoyed this journey, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into ancient history. Let us know in the comments which Maya city you'd like to visit most. See you in the next chapter. Welcome back to our series on the Maya civilization. In our last video, we explored the rise of their incredible cities. Today, we're diving deep into chapter 2. What exactly was a Maya city? It's a common misconception that there was a single, unified Maya empire, ruled by one emperor, like the Romans. The reality is far more fascinating. The Maya world was a complex web of independent kingdoms, or cities, each centered around a major city like Tikal Calakmul or Palenque. These kingdoms were constantly shifting, forming alliances, trading, and, yes, going to war with one another. Think of it less like a unified empire and more like ancient Greece, with its rival city-states like Athens and Sparta. They shared a common culture, religion, and language, but politically, they were fierce competitors. So, who was in charge of these powerful city-states? At the very top of the social pyramid was the ruler, the divine king, known as the asterisk, Kalajaw asterisk, or Holy Lord. The asterisk, Ajah asterisk, wasn't just a political leader. He was considered a living god, a direct intermediary between the mortal world and the supernatural realm. His authority was absolute. He was the head of the military, the chief priest, and the ultimate judge. The throne was hereditary, passing from father to son, creating powerful royal dynasties that could last for centuries. The life of an asterisk, Ajah asterisk, was one of immense privilege, but also immense responsibility. He had to perform sacred rituals, lead his armies in battle, and ensure the prosperity of his kingdom. If crops failed or his army was defeated, his divine right to rule could be questioned. Surrounding the asterisk, Ajaw asterisk, was his royal family and the elite nobility. This was the 1% of the Maya world. These nobles, often related to the king, held the most important positions in the government. They served as regional governors, high-ranking military commanders, court officials, and diplomats. They lived in luxurious stone palaces within the city center, enjoying a life of comfort and power. Their wealth came from tribute paid by commoners and control over valuable resources like cacao, jade, and obsidian. These nobles were also highly educated. They were the ones who could read and write the complex Maya hieroglyphic script, a skill that set them apart and reinforced their elite status. Just below the nobility, but equally important, were the priests. Religion was at the very heart of Maya life, and priests were the experts who managed this sacred connection. They were masters of the calendar, astronomers who tracked the movements of the stars and planets, and mathematicians. They determined the auspicious times for planting and harvesting, for going to war, and for all major royal ceremonies. They conducted the elaborate rituals and sacrifices sometimes, including human sacrifice, that were believed to appease the gods and maintain cosmic balance. While the AJAW* was the ultimate religious authority, it was the priests who handled the day-to-day spiritual administration of the kingdom. Moving down the social ladder, we find a vibrant middle class of skilled artisans and merchants. These were the master craftsmen who built and decorated the magnificent temples and palaces. They were the sculptors who carved the intricate stone monuments, or stelae, that recorded the history of their kings. They were the painters who created colorful murals, the potters who crafted beautiful ceramics, and the jewelers who worked with precious jade and shell. Their skills were highly valued by the elite, and they often lived in comfortable homes and enjoyed a higher standard of living than the average farmer. Merchants also played a crucial role, traveling long distances to trade goods between cities, creating a network of commerce that connected the entire Maya world. And at the base of this entire structure, forming the vast majority of the population, were the farmers. They were the backbone of the Maya economy. They lived in simpler houses made of wood and thatch in villages surrounding the main city center. Their lives were tied to the agricultural cycle, working tirelessly to cultivate the three sisters, maize, beans, and squash, which formed the core of the Maya diet. They used sophisticated techniques like terrace farming and raised fields to make the most of their environment. While their lives were hard, they were not slaves. They were the foundation upon which the entire civilization was built. Their surplus crops fed the king, the nobles, the priests, and the artisans. Their labor built the towering pyramids, and in times of war, they were the foot soldiers in the Jaws army. So, a Maya city-state was this intricate system of social layers, all revolving around the divine king. It was a world of kings and scribes, priests and warriors, artisans and farmers, and it was the dynamic, often violent, interaction between these rival kingdoms that defined the classic period of Maya history. The competition between them fueled an incredible boom in art, architecture, and scientific knowledge. Each AJW* wanted to outdo his rivals, to build a bigger temple, to commission a more beautiful carving, to prove his divine favor. T's rivalry, this patchwork of kingdoms, is what made the Maya world so incredibly dynamic and enduring. In our next chapter, we'll explore the spiritual world of the Maya, from their creation myths to their complex pantheon of gods. It's a journey into the heart and soul of this amazing civilization. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Welcome back to our journey into the heart of the Maya civilization. Today, we're delving into a concept that was the very bedrock of their society: the sacred king. This wasn't just about politics or power. For the Maya, kingship was a divine calling, a sacred trust handed down from the gods themselves. Imagine a world where your ruler isn't just a president or a prime minister, but a living conduit to the cosmos, a person whose very blood connects the earthly realm to the heavens. This was the reality for the ancient Maya. A king, or Kawalaja, which translates to Holy Lord, was seen as a descendant of the gods. Their legitimacy wasn't won in an election. It was inherited through a sacred bloodline that stretched back to the very moment of creation. This divine connection was everything. Royal lineages were meticulously recorded on stone monuments, or stelae, which you can still see today. These weren't just family trees, they were sacred texts, proving a king's right to rule by linking him directly to divine ancestors and patron deities. The king was the chief priest, the master of ceremonies, and the one who could speak with the gods on behalf of his people. He performed elaborate rituals, often involving bloodletting, to appease the deities, ensure fertile harvests, and maintain cosmic balance. His body was a sacred vessel, and his blood was the most potent offering he could give. This belief system permeated every aspect of Maya life, especially warfare. War wasn't just about conquering territory or gaining resources, although that was part of it. At its core, war was a sacred duty. When one city-state battled another, it was often seen as a cosmic struggle, a reenactment of mythological battles between gods. Capturing an enemy king was the ultimate prize. not just for the political victory, but for the immense ritual power it brought. These high-status captives were often sacrificed in grand public ceremonies, their life force offered to the gods to strengthen the victorious city and its divine ruler. Let's look at the city of Tikal, a powerhouse of the Maya world. Its rulers, like the great Jasa, Chancayahuela, cemented their authority through military might. In 695 AD, he famously defeated Tikal's longtime rival, This victory wasn't just announced in a political decree. It was immortalized on Temple 1, his future tomb. The carvings depict him as a triumphant warrior, celebrating a victory that was seen as divinely ordained. By defeating his rival, he proved that his connection to the gods was stronger, his destiny more favored. So, how did a new king take the throne? The accession ceremony was one of the most important events in the life of a city. It was a spectacle of immense religious significance. The heir would undergo rigorous purification rituals, fasting, and visions. On the chosen day, adorned in elaborate regalia made of jade, shells, and precious feathers, he would ascend the throne. Often a jaguar pelt-covered stone seat, he would receive the emblems of power, a sacred scepter, often in the form of the god Kaawil, the deity of royalty, and a headdress symbolizing his place in the cosmos. This wasn't a coronation, it was a transformation. The man became the Kagwalajao, a holy being responsible for the fate of his people. The king's life was a continuous performance of this sacred duty. He oversaw the construction of monumental temples and pyramids, not just as personal vanities, but as stages for ritual and as physical representations of the sacred landscape. These structures were aligned with celestial events like solstices and further binding the city and its ruler to the cosmic order. The king was the chief shaman, the chief astronomer, and the chief architect of his people's relationship with the divine. But what happened when a king died? His death was a moment of potential crisis. The connection to the gods was temporarily broken. That's why funerary rites were so elaborate. The king was laid to rest in a magnificent tomb, often within a pyramid, surrounded by immense wealth, jade masks, pottery filled with food for the afterlife, and even sacrificed retainers to serve him in the next world. He was being sent on his journey through the underworld Xibalba to be reborn as a god and join the ranks of his divine ancestors. From there, he would continue to watch over his city and his lineage. This cycle of divine birth, sacred rule, and godly death was the engine that drove Maya civilization for centuries. The belief that kings were more than mere mortals, that they were chosen by the gods and carried divine essence in their blood, gave their society a profound sense of order and purpose. It justified their social hierarchy, sanctified their wars, and inspired some of the most breathtaking art and architecture the world has ever seen. It's a concept that can be hard to grasp from our modern perspective. But to understand the Maya, we must understand their kings. They were the axis around which the Maya world turned, the living bridge between humanity and the gods. Thanks for joining me on this exploration of Maya divine kingship. If you found this fascinating, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll be diving even deeper into the mysteries of this incredible civilization. See you next time. Have you ever wondered how we know so much about ancient civilizations that existed thousands of years ago? How do we know who their kings were, what gods they worshipped, or who they fought? For the ancient Maya, a huge part of the answer is written in stone. Welcome to Chapter 4 of our journey into the Maya world. The first recorded wars in stone. Imagine walking through a dense jungle and stumbling upon a towering stone monument covered in intricate carvings. These are stele, the stone billboards of the ancient Maya kings. But these aren't just pretty sculptures. They are historical documents, diaries of entire cities, etched in a complex and beautiful writing system. For a long time, scholars thought these carvings only depicted priests, gods, and astronomical events. They believed the Maya were a peaceful, stargazing people. But as we began to crack the code of Maya hieroglyphs in the mid-20th century, a very different, much more dramatic story emerged from the silent stone. These stele were telling tales of war, conquest, and brutal political maneuvering. The Maya writing system is one of the most sophisticated in the ancient world. It's a logosyllabic system, which is a fancy way of saying it uses a combination of signs representing whole words, called logograms, and signs representing syllables. Think of it like a mix of Chinese characters and a phonetic alphabet. This allowed their scribes to write down anything they could say, from complex royal titles to the day-to-day business of the court. And one of the most important things they wrote about was war. The Maya took record-keeping very seriously, especially when it came to their military victories. When a king won a significant battle, he'd commission a stela to commemorate it for all eternity. These monuments were public displays of power, erected in the main plazas of cities like Tikal. They were meant to be seen by everyone, from commoners to visiting nobles, as a constant reminder of the king's might. So what exactly did they carve? First, the date. The Maya were obsessed with time and had an incredibly precise calendar system called the long count. On these stelae, you'll find the exact date of the battle, sometimes down to the very day. This allows us historians to create incredibly detailed timelines of conflicts that happened over 1,000 years ago. It's like finding a newspaper from 750 AD. Next, the event itself. The hieroglyphs would describe the battle using powerful verbs. Words like shock, meaning to axe, or decapitate, or hubai, meaning to bring down or to destroy. They weren't shy about the violent details. The carvings often show the victorious king, dressed in his finest jaguar pelt battle gear, standing triumphantly over his defeated and often humiliated enemies. And who were these enemies? The stelae tell us that too. They record the names and titles of captured kings and high-ranking nobles from rival cities. Captives were a huge part of Maya warfare. Capturing a rival king was the ultimate prize. These captives would be brought back to the victor's city, paraded through the streets, and often subjected to ritual humiliation before being sacrificed. The stelae don't just tell us this. They show us. We see carvings of captives, stripped of their finery, their hands bound, kneeling at the feet of their conqueror. Their names are often written right next to their portraits, a permanent record of their defeat. Let's look at a famous example. Stela 2 from Dos Pilas, a city in modern de Guatemala, tells a story of betrayal and war. It records a conflict in the year 672 AD. The ruler of Dos Pilas, Balashankaril, was originally from the great city of Tico. But the stela tells us that he was attacked by his own brother from Tico. He was defeated and forced to switch his allegiance to Tikal's sworn enemy, the superpower. Years later, under the banner of Calakmul, he launched a counterattack and defeated Tikal. The stela depicts him standing over the captured, bound ruler of a Tikal-allied city. It's a complete political soap opera, full of family drama and shifting alliances, all recorded for posterity on a massive limestone slab. Without this stela, we would know almost nothing about this pivotal moment in Maya history. These stone records also reveal the scale and nature of Maya warfare. For a long time, it was thought that Maya wars were small-scale, ritualistic affairs aimed only at capturing elites for sacrifice. While that was certainly one aspect, the glyphs tell a bigger story. They mention events called Star Wars, which were particularly significant battles timed to celestial events, like the movements of the planet Venus, which the Maya associated with war. These Star War events often signaled a major conquest, where one city would decisively defeat another, sometimes leading to the loser's complete destruction and the end of its royal dynasty. The famous rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul, the two superpowers of the classic Maya period, is documented extensively on stone monuments across the entire Maya region. We can track their proxy wars, their direct confrontations, and their periods of dominance by reading the stelae in the cities they conquered. When Tikal was victorious, its allies would erect monuments, boasting of their shared victory. When Calakmul was on top, its vassals did the same. The stelae act like a political map, showing us the shifting tides of power over centuries. It's truly incredible when you think about it. Most of what we know about the political history of the classic Maya period, names of their kings, the dates of their reigns, their major achievements, and their devastating wars doesn't come from fragile paper books, most of which were lost to time or destroyed. It comes from these silent stone witnesses. They have endured centuries of jungle growth, rain, and humidity, preserving the stories of kings and warriors. These stelae challenge us to see the Maya not as one-dimensional, peaceful mystics, but as a complex, dynamic, and fully human civilization. They had brilliant astronomers and artists, but they also had ambitious kings and fierce warriors. They built magnificent cities and then fought brutal wars to control them. And thanks to their obsession with recording their history in stone, we can still hear their stories today. This stone speaks, and it tells a tale of power, glory, and blood as we continue to decipher more and more of the Maya script. These stone monuments will undoubtedly reveal even more secrets about their fascinating and often violent world. They are the true history books of the Maya, written by the victors for all to see forever. Thanks for watching. If you're fascinated by the stories hidden in ancient stones, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Join us next time as we dive even deeper into the world of Maya warfare. You won't want to miss it. Deep in the heart of the Patan rainforest, a story of ambition, power, and stone giants was beginning to unfold. This is the story of Tikal, a city destined to become a Maya superpower, its rise echoing through the dense jungle canopy. Welcome back to our series on the Maya civilization. Today, we journey to the eastern lowlands to witness the birth of a legend. Our story begins around 600 BC, when small, scattered farming villages dotted the landscape that would one day become Tikal. Early settlers were drawn by the fertile soil and the relative safety of the high ground, surrounded by seasonal swamps, or bahos. For centuries, life was simple, but deep within this community, the seeds of greatness were being sown. By the 1st century AD, something changed. The small village began to transform. Monumental architecture started to appear, signaling a shift in social structure and ambition. This was the dawn of Tikal as a city. The true turning point came with the founding of Tikal's royal dynasty. According to later inscriptions, a legendary ruler named Yax-Ib, or First Step Shark, established the royal line around 90 AD while shrouded in myth. His name marks the beginning of a lineage of kings, or a Jaws, who would steer Tikal's destiny for the next 800 years. This dynastic foundation provided the political stability and centralized authority needed for large-scale projects and expansion. It was the engine that would drive Tikal's ascent. With a royal dynasty in place, Tikal began to flex its muscles. The early Classic period, from about 250 to 600 AD, was an era of explosive growth. The kings of Tikal were not content to simply rule their city. They had their eyes on the entire region. One of the key figures in this early expansion was a king known as Foliated Jaguar, who reigned in the early 4th century. Under his rule, Tikal began to exert its influence over smaller, neighboring centers, likely through a combination of strategic alliances, political marriages, and military intimidation. The ambition of Tikal's rulers was etched into the very fabric of their city. They didn't just build structures, they built statements. This is when we see the emergence of Tikal's signature architectural style. Towering pyramid temples with steep stairways and elaborate roof combs that seemed to scrape the sky. The North Acropolis, a sprawling complex that served as a royal necropolis, became a layered monument to the dynasty's power. Each new king would build his own temple on top of his predecessors, creating a literal mountain of royal history, with each layer representing a generation of divine kingship. These structures weren't just for religious ceremonies. They were political propaganda carved in stone, visible 4 miles around and broadcasting a clear message. Tikal is powerful, Tikal is divine, and Tikal is here to stay. The city's influence wasn't just built on stone and might. Tikal was situated at a critical crossroads. It controlled the portage route between 2 major river systems, the Pazian and the Usumacinta to the west, and the rivers flowing into the Caribbean to the east. This strategic location made Tikal a vital hub in the vast trade network that crisscrossed Mesoamerica. Cacao, salt, obsidian, jade, and exotic feathers flowed through its markets, bringing immense wealth and prestige to its rulers. This economic power fueled further construction and allowed Tikal to project its influence far beyond its immediate neighbors. However, Tikal was not the only powerful city in the Maya world. As its influence grew, it inevitably came into contact and conflict with other rising powers. To the west lay the mighty kingdom of Calakmul, the Snake Kingdom, which would become Tikal's great rival in a struggle for dominance that would define the classic Maya period for centuries. But in these early days, another, more distant power cast a long shadow over the Maya lowlands. The great city of Teotihuacan, far away in central Mexico. In the year 378 AD, a pivotal event occurred, known as the Entrada. Inscriptions tell of the arrival of a foreigner named Siajkeg, or Fire is Born, who came from the west, likely from Teotihuacan, or acting on its behalf. On the very same day he arrived, Tikal's king, Chaktokichuk, or Great Chaguar Por, died. This was no coincidence, it was a code. Siajkeg installed a new ruler, a young boy named Yaxnunahianai, who was the son of a powerful figure from Teotihuacan. This event dramatically altered Tikal's trajectory. The Teotihuacan intervention ushered in a new era of prosperity and cultural exchange for Tikal. New dynasty blended Maya traditions with Teotihuacano styles in art, architecture, and even warfare. The use of the atlatl, or spear thrower, a hallmark of Teotihuacan warriors, became more prominent. Iconography featuring Gogulid war gods and talitablero architectural styles, both distinctive of Teotihuacan, began appearing in Tikal. This foreign connection elevated Tikal's status, giving it an edge over its regional rivals. It became the southern proxy of the most powerful city in Mesoamerica. Under this new Teotihuacan-backed dynasty, Tikal's ambitions soared to new heights. The 5th century king Siash-Chankaiwil II, son of Yaxnunahianai, embarked on a massive building program, constructing some of Tikal's most iconic early structures. He celebrated the anniversary of the Entrada with grand ceremonies, reinforcing the legitimacy of his foreign-linked lineage. Tikal's sphere of influence expanded dramatically. The city established a new ruling line at the nearby city of Uaxaction and exerted control over other centers like Cupan and Quirigua, far to the southeast, planting its dynasty across the Maya world. Tikal's heart, the Great Plaza, became a breathtaking stage for this power. Flanked by the towering Temple I and Temple II, the North Acropolis to one side and the Central Acropolis to the other, it was the epicenter of political and religious life. Imagine the scene. Thousands of people gathered in the plaza, the air thick with the smoke of copal incense, watching the divine king adorned in jade and brilliant quetzal feathers ascend the steep stairway of a temple to commune with the gods. It was a spectacle designed to awe and inspire loyalty, a physical manifestation of the cosmic order, with the king of Tikal at its very center. From a collection of small villages to a bustling metropolis, the early history of Tikal is a testament to vision, strategy, and sheer will. Its rulers founded a dynasty, harnessed economic power, and forged powerful alliances to build a city that could dominate the eastern lowlands. Their ambition was monumental, their legacy carved in stone and written in the stars. But this was only the beginning. The rise of Tikal set the stage for a great rivalry that would plunge the Maya world into a superpower struggle for centuries to come. Thanks for watching. In our next chapter, we'll explore the rise of Tikal's great nemesis, the Snake Kingdom of Calakmul, and the beginning of a conflict that would define an era. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through the magnificent Maya civilization. In our last chapter, we marveled at the splendor of Tikal, a city that seemed destined to rule the Maya world. But every great power has a rival, and Tikal's was a formidable one, a superpower whose influence stretched across the entire Maya region. Today, we ventured deep into the jungle to uncover the story of Tikal's greatest adversary, the mighty city of Calakmul, the heart of the Snake Kingdom. Our story begins in the vast Patan Basin, in what is now southern Mexico. Here, nestled amidst a dense, sprawling jungle, lies the sprawling metropolis of Calakmul. The name Calakmul means city of the two adjacent pyramids in Yucatec Maya, a nod to two of its most massive structures that dominate the landscape. But in its heyday, this city was known by a different name, a name that struck both fear and reverence into the hearts of its neighbors. Oxtetun, or Three Stones. For much of the Maya Classic period, from about 250 to 900 AD, Calakmul wasn't just a city. It was the capital of a political and military powerhouse known as the Kanal dynasty, or the Kingdom of the Snake. The rulers of this dynasty were known as the Kawul Kanalaja, the divine lords of the snake. Their emblem, the fearsome head of a serpent, was a symbol recognized and respected across hundreds of miles. The origins of the Snake Kingdom are still debated by scholars. Early evidence suggests they may have first established their power at a site called Gabon, further to the east, before moving their capital to the more central and strategic location of Calakmul around the year 635. This move was a game changer. From Calakmul, the Snake Kings could exert direct influence over a vast network of cities, positioning themselves to challenge the dominant power of the time. Tikal, the rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul, was the defining political conflict of the classic Maya period. It was a Mesoamerican Cold War, a decades-long struggle for supremacy between two superpowers. But unlike modern conflicts, this wasn't just about direct warfare. The Conal dynasty were masters of diplomacy and political maneuvering. Their strategy was brilliant and effective. They built a web of alliances that encircled their rival. Instead of trying to conquer every city in their path, the Snake Kings used a combination of strategic marriages, political patronage, and military support to bring other Maya kingdoms into their sphere of influence. They would install loyal rulers in vassal states or support one faction in a local power struggle over another. The emblem of the Snake King would start appearing on monuments in cities far and wide, from El Perhuaca to the west to Conquin in the south, and even Duspilas, a city founded by a renegade prince from Tikal itself. This network of alliances effectively created a pincer movement around Tikal, isolating it from its traditional allies and choking off its trade routes. The goal was clear: to undermine Tikal's power base and establish the Conal dynasty as the undisputed overlords of the southern Maya lowlands. One of the most significant figures in this saga was the king known as Yuknumchin II, also called Yuknum the Great. He ruled Calakmul during the 7th century, a period often considered the golden age of the Snake Kingdom. Under his long and prosperous reign, Calakmul's influence reached its absolute zenith. Yuknum the Great was a master strategist. He solidified existing alliances and forged new ones, extending his power further than any Snake King before him. Monuments from this era celebrate his role as a supreme overlord. The Kalund, a title reserved for only the most powerful Maya rulers, essentially meaning emperor or high king. During his reign, Calakmul itself grew into a colossal city. It was one of the largest in the Maya world, covering an area of over 27 square miles, and supporting a population estimated to be around 50,000 in its urban core, with many more in the surrounding farmlands. The city center is dominated by two massive pyramids, simply called Structure 1 and Structure 2. Structure 2 is one of the tallest Maya pyramids ever built, soaring over 148 feet into the sky. Climbing it today, you can see nothing but an endless sea of green jungles stretching to the horizon, the same view the Snake Kings would have had. But Calakmul was more than just pyramids. Archaeologists have identified over 6,750 ancient structures here. The city was a bustling hub of commerce, politics, and religion, connected by a network of sakbib, or white roads, raised causeways that crisscrossed the city and extended out into the surrounding region, linking Calakmul to its suburban centers and satellite settlements. The city's also famous for its incredible number of stele carved stone monuments that recorded the history and accomplishments of its rulers. Calakmul has more stele than any other Maya site, with over 117 discovered so far. These stones are our primary source for understanding the history of the Snake Kingdom. They tell stories of royal accessions, marriages, rituals, and, of course, wars. They depict the Snake Kings in all their glory, adorned with elaborate costumes, wielding symbols of power, and often standing over bound captives. The conflict between Calakmul and Tikal was not a continuous war, but a series of major battles and proxy wars fought over generations. One of the most famous confrontations occurred in 562 AD, a conflict known as the Star War. This was a decisive victory for the Snake Kingdom and its allies. The forces of Calakmul, led by a king named Sky Witness, defeated Tikal. Following this defeat, Tikal entered a period of decline that historians called the Tikal hiatus. For over a century, Tikal ceased to erect monuments. Its political influence waned, and it was effectively a vassal state under the thumb of the Snake Kings. This was the peak of Calakmul's power. The snake had coiled around the jaguar, and its grip was tight. However, no empire lasts forever. Tikal was wounded, but not broken. The city bided its time, rebuilding its strength. In 695 AD, a new, dynamic ruler of Tikal named Jasaw Calakmul, I launched a daring attack on Calakmul. In a great battle, the forces of Tikal captured Calakmul's king, the formidable Yaknumichak cake, or jaguar paw smoke. This was a catastrophic defeat for the Snake Kingdom. The event was immortalized on Lintel 3 of Temple Tikal, showing the captured king of Calakmul as a bound captive. While this battle didn't destroy Calakmul, it shattered the illusion of its invincibility. The intricate network of alliances built by the Snake Kings began to unravel as vassal states, seeing the central power weakened, began to assert their independence or switch their allegiance back to a resurgent Tikal. For the next century, Calakmul continued to be a major player, but it never fully recovered its former glory. The Khanal dynasty fractured, with some branches of the family attempting to re-establish the kingdom at other sites. The city of Calakmul itself went into a slow decline, mirroring the broader collapse that was beginning to affect the entire southern Maya lowlands. By the 10th century, like Tikal and other great cities of the region, Calakmul was largely abandoned, its monumental pyramids and grand plazas slowly being reclaimed by the relentless jungle. Today, Calakmul offers a different experience from more manicured sites like Chichen Itza or Uxmal. It is a wilder, more remote place, a designated biosphere reserve teeming with wildlife. As you walk its ancient causeways, you might see spider monkeys swinging in the trees above, hear the call of a toot, or even spot the tracks of a jaguar, the very animal that was the symbol of its great rival, Tikal. The story of Calakmul is a crucial reminder that Maya history was not a monolithic narrative of a single empire. It was a complex tapestry of competing city-states, shifting alliances, and epic rivalries. The Snake Kingdom of Calakmul was one of the most powerful and influential forces in this world, a dynasty that, for a time, held the fate of the Maya lowlands in its grasp. Its rise and fall is a dramatic tale of ambition, strategy, and power that shaped the course of Mesoamerican history. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the Great Snake Kingdom. In our next chapter, we will travel to a city renowned for its artistry and its unique dynastic history, a place where a powerful queen left an indelible mark. Join us as we uncover the secrets of Palenque. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. See you next time. Welcome back to our series on the ancient Maya. Today, we're diving deep into the intricate world of Maya warfare. If you're picturing isolated city-states having the occasional skirmish, you'll want to stick around, because the reality was far more complex and fascinating. It was a world of shifting alliances, political maneuvering, and conflicts that rippled across the entire Maya region. This is Chapter 7. Alliance networks and proxy wars. Let's start by dispelling a common myth. A war between two Maya cities was almost never just a private affair. These conflicts were deeply embedded in a vast and ever-changing network of political relationships. Think of it less like a boxing match and more like a massive, multiplayer game of chess, where every move had consequences for dozens of other players on the board. The Maya world was a dynamic landscape of powerful capitals and smaller vassal states, all connected through ties of loyalty, obligation, rivalry, and ambition. At the heart of this system were the great regional powers, cities like Tikal Calakmul and Copan. These were the superpowers of their time, each vying for dominance. Their rivalry, especially the centuries-long struggle between Tikal and Calakmul, often called the superpower struggle, defined the political climate for centuries, but they rarely fought each other directly in massive, head-on battles. Instead, they engaged in a sophisticated game of geopolitical strategy, using smaller cities as their pawns. This is what we call proxy warfare. So, how did a proxy war work in the Maya world? A major power like Calakmul would support a smaller city. Let's call it City A, in its conflict against a neighbor, City B, which happened to be an ally of Calakmul's main rival. Tikal Calakmul might provide military aid, resources, or even elite warriors to bolster City A's army. The goal wasn't necessarily to conquer City B outright, but to weaken Tikal's network of influence. By helping City A win, Calakmul would destabilize its rival's power base and expand its own. We see this pattern repeated time and again in the hieroglyphic records. A carving might celebrate a victory by a smaller king, but also explicitly mentioned that the battle was overseen or witnessed by the king of a great power. This was a clear signal that the victory was part of a much larger strategic play. This system created a volatile and unpredictable environment. Alliances were not permanent. A city that was a loyal ally one day could switch its allegiance to the next if it saw a better opportunity. A defeat in battle could force a city to abandon its old patron and swear fealty to a new one. This constant shifting of loyalties meant that the balance of power was always in flux. Kings and nobles had to be astute diplomats and strategists, constantly assessing the political landscape and forging relationships to ensure their survival and prosperity. One of the most powerful tools for building these alliances was marriage. Royal marriages were not about love. They were strategic transactions designed to cement political bonds. A powerful king would marry his daughter to the ruler of a smaller, strategically important city. This did several things. It created a familial tie, making the smaller city a junior partner in an alliance. It also placed a high-ranking noble from the powerful city the new queen into the court of the ally, where she could exert influence and ensure loyalty. Her children would carry the prestigious bloodline of the major power, further solidifying the connection. These marriage alliances created vast networks that could be called upon in times of war. An attack on one member of the network was often seen as an attack on all, bringing the full weight of the allied cities down on the aggressor. Smaller cities and towns were constantly caught in the middle of these great power struggles. They had little choice but to align themselves with one of the major players. Choosing the right side could bring protection, trade opportunities, and prestige. Choosing the wrong side, or trying to remain neutral, could be disastrous. A small, unaligned city was a tempting target for its larger neighbors. It could be conquered and forced into vassalage, its ruler captured and sacrificed, and its resources plundered. For these smaller polities, survival depended on navigating the treacherous waters of international diplomacy, pledging loyalty to a powerful patron who could protect them from their enemies. Their fate was often decided not on their own battlefields, but in the royal courts of distant capitals. This system of alliances and proxies also influenced the nature of warfare itself. While large-scale battles to conquer territory did happen, many conflicts were more like targeted raids. The primary goal was often not to annihilate an enemy army or occupy a city, but to capture high-ranking individuals. Capturing an enemy king or a prominent lord was a massive political statement. The captive could be held for ransom, forced to become a vassal, or, in many cases, publicly humiliated and sacrificed. This was the ultimate demonstration of power, a way to demoralize an enemy and assert dominance without the cost of a full-scale invasion. The inscriptions are full of rulers boasting about the important captives they took, listing their names and titles as trophies of war. The scale of these networks could be truly impressive. At the height of its power, the alliance led by Calakmul, known as the Snake Kingdom, included dozens of cities spread across hundreds of miles. This vast confederation allowed Calakmul to encircle and eventually defeat its great rival Tikal in a major war in the 6th century. The victory wasn't just Calakmul, it was a victory for its entire network of allies and vassals who had contributed to the effort. This event, known as the Tikal hiatus, shows just how effective these grand alliances could be, reshaping the political map of the Maya world for generations. In conclusion, Maya warfare was a far cry from simple, isolated conflicts. It was a complex and dynamic system of alliance networks, proxy wars, and strategic diplomacy. Great powers like Tikal and Calakmul competed for dominance, not just through direct confrontation, but by manipulating a web of smaller states. Marriage alliances cemented these relationships, while the constant threat of capture and sacrifice kept rulers on edge. Smaller cities were forced to choose sides, their fates tied to the grand strategies of their powerful patrons. Understanding this intricate political game is key to understanding the rise and fall of the great Maya kingdoms. It reveals a world that was as politically sophisticated and strategically complex as any in human history. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. I hope it's given you a new perspective on the ancient Maya. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into this incredible civilization. We'll see you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that often gets sensationalized: Maya warfare. When we think of ancient warfare, images of massive armies clashing and cities burning to the ground often come to mind. But for the classic Maya, things were a bit different. It was a complex and fascinating system, far from the simple, brutal conquest we might imagine. So, Let's peel back the layers and explore Chapter 8. Warfare the Maya Way. First, let's talk about timing. Maya warfare wasn't a year-round affair. It was highly seasonal. The Maya were first and foremost an agricultural society. Their lives revolved around the planting and harvesting of maize. The rainy season, from roughly May to October, was crucial for farming. This was a time of intense labor in the fields, and it was simply impractical to pull thousands of men away to fight. The rain also turned the jungle paths into impassable muddy tracks, making it incredibly difficult to move troops and supplies. So, when did they go to war? They waited for the dry season. From about November to April, the harvest was in, food was stored, and the jungle trails were clear. This was the window for military campaigns. This seasonal pattern meant that warfare was a predictable, cyclical part of life, not a constant, looming threat. Now, let's look at the armies themselves. Forget the Hollywood image of tens of thousands of soldiers marching in perfect formation. Maya armies were typically much smaller, likely numbering in the low thousands at most. Even for the most powerful cities, these weren't professional, standing armies like the Roman legions. The soldiers were primarily farmers and commoners, called up for service when needed. They were led by the king, the Aja*, and his nobles, who were the elite. Full-time warriors. These nobles were decked out in spectacular, intimidating costumes. Imagine them wearing elaborate headdresses of brilliant macaw and quetzal feathers, jaguar pelts, and intricate jade jewelry. Their goal wasn't just to look impressive. It was to project divine power and intimidate their rivals. The common soldiers, on the other hand, were more lightly equipped, often with just a spear, a blowgun, or a stone-bladed axe, and protected by padded cotton armor. So what were they fighting with? The Maya had a range of effective weapons. The primary long-range weapon was the asterisk, or spear thrower. This device acted as a leva, allowing a warrior to hurl a light spear, or dart, with incredible force and accuracy over a much greater distance than by hand. For close-quarters combat, they used short stabbing spears, flint, or obsidian-bladed axes, and clubs. Some of these clubs were even lined with sharp obsidian blades, a weapon famously used by other Mesoamerican cultures as well. They also used blowguns with poison-tipped darts, which were excellent for ambushes in the dense jungle. Shields were typically made of wood or woven materials, often decorated with symbols of power. The combination of these weapons made Maya battles swift, intense, and deadly encounters. But here's where Maya warfare really diverges from what we might expect. The primary goal wasn't always to conquer and hold vast territories, or to wipe out the enemy population. While controlling trade routes and agricultural land was certainly a factor, the main objective of many classic Maya wars was the capture of high-status individuals. The ultimate prize was capturing the rival king or members of his royal family. This was about prestige and political power. Capturing an enemy lord was a massive propaganda victory. It demonstrated the superior power of your city's patron gods and your own divine right to rule. These captives weren't just thrown in a dungeon. Their capture was a centerpiece of a grand public spectacle. These captured elites would be taken back to the victor's city and displayed for all to see. Inscriptions and art from cities like Yaxchilan and Bonampak vividly depict these scenes. The captives are shown, stripped of their fine clothing, humbled and awaiting their fate. What was that fate? Often, it involved ritual sacrifice. This might sound brutal to us, but for the Maya, it was a profoundly important religious act. They believed that human blood, especially the blood of powerful elites, was a precious substance that nourished the gods and maintained the cosmic order. The sacrifice of a rival king was the ultimate offering, a way to ensure the continued prosperity and stability of their own kingdom. It was a political and religious statement, broadcast to their people and their enemies. This focus on capturing elites meant that battles were often they were almost like a deadly, large-scale tournament between noble factions. While commoners were involved and certainly died in the fighting, the main event was the clash between the nobles. The battle might even end once a key noble or the king was captured, rather than continuing until one army was completely wiped out. This isn't to say that Maya warfare wasn't brutal. It absolutely was. There was real violence and loss of life, but the strategic objective was different. It was a limited form of warfare, focused on political dominance and ritual performance rather than total annihilation. However, it is important to note that this model of warfare began to change towards the end of the Classic period. Around the 8th and 9th centuries AD, archaeological evidence suggests that warfare became more intense and destructive. We start to see more evidence of cities being burned, defensive walls being hastily erected, and larger-scale violence. Some scholars believe this escalation in warfare was a major contributing factor to the so-called classic Maya collapse, where the great southern lowland cities were abandoned. The system of limited, ritualized warfare may have broken down under the pressure of environmental stress, overpopulation, and political instability, leading to a more desperate and destructive kind of conflict. It's a reminder that even ancient traditions can change dramatically when circumstances shift. So, to sum up, classic Maya warfare was a unique and complex institution. It was seasonal, dictated by the agricultural calendar. It was fought by relatively small armies, led by fabulously adorned nobles. And its primary goal was often not territorial conquest, but the capture of elite prisoners for ritual and political purposes. It was a system that blended politics, religion, and violence in a way that is distinctly Mesoamerican. It challenges our modern assumptions about war and forces us to see conflict through a very different cultural lens. The Maya weren't just fighting for land. They were fighting for prestige, for their gods, and for their place in the cosmos. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of Maya warfare. It's a subject that reveals so much about their worldview and the intricate workings of their society. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into ancient history. Let us know in the comments what other aspects of Maya civilization you'd like to learn about. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Welcome back to our series where we dive deep into the brutal realities of ancient warfare. Today, in Chapter 9, we re-exploring a topic that is as fascinating as it is grim, the capture of kings. Why was taking an enemy ruler alive so much more significant than simply killing them on the battlefield? Let's uncover the strategic and symbolic power behind this ultimate act of dominance. In the ancient world, a king wasn't just a political leader. They were often seen as a divine representative, the living embodiment of their people's strength, prosperity, and favor with the gods. Their body was the state, and their life force was tied directly to the well-being of their kingdom. So, killing a king in the heat of battle was one thing, but capturing them, that was a whole different level of victory. It wasn't just a military win. It was a spiritual and psychological demolition of an entire civilization. Imagine the scene, a victorious army parading through their capital city. The crowds are roaring, celebrating their triumph. And there, at the heart of the procession, is the defeated king, stripped of his finery, bound in chains, forced to walk behind his conqueror's chariot. This wasn't just about showing off a prisoner. It was a carefully orchestrated spectacle of humiliation. The message was crystal clear. Your god king is now our slave. His power is broken, and his divinity is a lie. This public degradation was a powerful tool to demoralize the conquered people and solidify the victor's authority. Take the Romans, for example. They perfected the art of the triumphal procession. Captured leaders like Vercingetorix of the Gauls or Queen Zenobia of Palmyra were paraded through the streets of Rome, a living testament to Roman might. For the Roman citizens, it was the ultimate proof of their empire's invincibility. For the conquered, it was a soul-crushing confirmation of their defeat. After being displayed, these captured rulers often faced a grim fate. Vercingetorix, for instance, was held in a dungeon 4 years before being ritually strangled to coincide with Julius Caesar's triumph. His death wasn't just an execution. It was the final, symbolic act that sealed the conquest of Gaul. This brings us to the ritualistic aspect of capturing kings. In many cultures, a captured monarch became a key component in religious ceremonies. Their life force was seen as a potent offering to the victor's gods. For civilizations like the Maya or the Aztecs, the capture of a rival ruler or a Jah was the pinnacle of warfare. These captives weren't just executed, they were sacrificed in elaborate public rituals. The captured king might be forced to play a ceremonial ball game where the outcome was predetermined he would lose and then be sacrificed. This was believed to appease the gods, ensure bountiful harvests, and reaffirm the cosmic order under the new, dominant power. The blood of a king was the most powerful sacrifice one could offer. Think about the psychological impact. When your king, the person you believed was protected by the gods, is publicly tortured and sacrificed by your enemies. What does that do to your morale? It shatters it completely. It proves, in the most visceral way possible, that your gods have abandoned you and your enemies' gods are stronger. This spiritual devastation was often more effective than any army in preventing future rebellions. The dynasty was not just defeated. It was spiritually erased. The capture of a king could also be a tool for political restructuring. Instead of immediate execution, a conqueror might hold the captured monarch as a puppet. They could force the king to sign treaties, cede territory, or command his remaining forces to stand down. The king's authority, even in captivity, could be weaponized against his own people. The Sassanid king Shapur I famously captured the Roman emperor Valerian in 268. Accounts suggest Shapur used Valerian as a human footstool to mount his horse, a daily ritual of humiliation that demonstrated his absolute power over the once mighty Roman Empire. After Valerian's death, his skin was allegedly flayed, stuffed with straw, and put on display, a permanent warning to any who would challenge Sassanid authority. This practice of capturing rulers rewrote political landscapes. When a royal line was broken so dramatically, it created a power vacuum. The old dynasty was not just replaced, it was nullified. A new order was established, built upon the symbolic and literal destruction of the old one. The conqueror didn't just win a war. They rewrote history, claiming divine mandate and reshaping the identity of the conquered people. The capture of a king was the ultimate checkmate, a move that ended the game and scattered the pieces of the old kingdom to the wind. It was a statement of total conquest, from the battlefield to the heavens. So, while the image of a king falling in glorious battle is a common trope, the reality of being captured was far more terrifying and consequential. It was a fate worse than death, a descent into public shame, ritualistic death, and the complete erasure of one's legacy. It was the ultimate weapon in the arsenal of ancient conquerors, a method to not only defeat an enemy but to annihilate their entire world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the brutal strategies of the past. If you found this fascinating, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll see you next time. In the heart of the Maya world, two titans clashed for supremacy. On one side, the mighty city of Tikal, a beacon of culture and power for centuries. On the other, the rising serpent kingdom of Calakmul, ambitious and cunning. For years, they were locked in a cold war, a complex chess game played with alliances, trade routes, and political marriages. But in the mid-6th century, the simmering rivalry was about to boil over into a conflict that would change the course of Maya history forever. This is the story of Tikal's great defeat, a cataclysmic event that plunged one of the greatest cities of the ancient world into a century of darkness. Let's set the stage. By the early 500 CE, Tikal was the undisputed king of the Patan Basin. Its rulers, like the great Chaktok Ichak II, commanded a vast network of vassal states. Their temples scraped the sky, and their influence stretched for hundreds of kilometers. They were the New York or London of their time, a vibrant metropolis that seemed invincible. But in the shadows, a rival was consolidating its power. Calakmul, the capital of the Conal dynasty, or the Kingdom of the Snake, was building a powerful anti-Tikal alliance. One by one, Calakmul's shrewd diplomats and warrior kings turned Tikal's neighbors, and even some of its own vassals, against it. They encircled Tikal, cutting off its trade routes and isolating it politically. The noose was tightening. The king of Tikal at this critical juncture was Wakchan K. He was a determined ruler, a man who understood the threat posed by Calakmul and was not willing to back down. He ascended to the throne in 537 CE, and for the next 2 decades, he actively fought to reassert Tikal's dominance. He launched military campaigns and tried to shore up his weakening alliances. It was a desperate struggle to maintain the old order against a tide of change orchestrated by Calakmul's formidable ruler, a king known only as Sky Witness. Sky Witness was a master strategist, and he had a powerful ally in the city of Karakul, located to the south of Tikal. Karakul had once been a subordinate of Tikal, but it switched its allegiance to Calakmul, creating a formidable two-front threat. The fateful year was 562 CE. The tension that had been building for decades finally erupted. Sky Witness of Calakmul, alongside his allies from Karakale, and other cities, launched a coordinated attack on Tikal. The historical records are sparse on the details of the battle itself, but the outcome is chillingly clear. On a day that corresponds to April 29, 562, an inscription at Karakol records a major victory. It uses a specific glyph, a Star War event, signifying a particularly destructive type of warfare aimed at the complete defeat, and often the capture and sacrifice of the enemy king. The target of this Star War, the kingdom of Tikal. The inscription then states that Wakcham Kayawil, the king of Tikal, was defeated. His fate is not explicitly stated, but the evidence strongly suggests he was captured and sacrificed. Imagine the shock that must have rippled through the Maya world. The seemingly untouchable king of Tikal, vanquished, the city that had dominated the landscape for generations, brought to its knees. The aftermath of this defeat was devastating for Tikal. It wasn't just a military loss, it was a complete and utter humiliation that shattered the city's prestige and power. The victory of the Calakmul alliance ushered in a period known to archaeologists as the Tikal hiatus. It's a truly fascinating and mysterious time. For the next 130 years, Tikal fell silent. Literally, the city that was once famous for its constant construction and elaborate stone monuments, known as stelae, suddenly stopped building them. No new temples were dedicated, no new palaces were built, and most strikingly, no new stelae were carved to commemorate the reigns and achievements of its rulers. It's as if the city's voice was silenced. Its history, which had been so meticulously recorded in stone for all to see, went dark. What did this silence mean? For a Maya city, ceasing to erect monuments was a sign of catastrophic decline. These stelae were not just decorations. They were public declarations of a king's legitimacy and power. They recorded his lineage, his military victories, and his divine right to rule. To stop carving them was to admit to the world that you had lost that power, that your dynasty was broken. During this 130-year hiatus, Tikal didn't disappear. People still lived there, markets still operated, and life went on. But the city was a shadow of its former self. It became a second-rate power, likely subordinate to Calakmul or its allies. Its royal line may have been broken or replaced with puppet rulers who answered to the Snake Kingdom. Tikal's grand plazas, once teeming with nobles and artisans celebrating the latest royal achievement, grew quiet. The city's spirit was broken. Meanwhile, Calakmul and its allies entered their golden age. With Tikal out of the picture, the Khanel dynasty became the undisputed superpower of the southern Maya lowlands. They controlled vast trade networks, commanded the loyalty of dozens of other cities, and their own capital at Calakmul grew into a sprawling metropolis, rivaling Tikal in size and grandeur. Kings like Yaknum the Great ruled over a vast and prosperous sphere of influence. For over a century, the emblem of the snakehead was the symbol of ultimate authority in the Maya world. It seemed as though the glory of Tikal was a thing of the past, a memory of a fallen giant. But history is rarely so simple, and the story of Tikal was far from over. Even during its darkest hour, the seeds of a future resurgence were being sown. The people of Tikal never forgot their city's former glory. The memory of their powerful ancestors and their magnificent city fueled a desire for revenge and restoration. Deep within the city, a new royal line was likely biding its time, waiting for the right moment to reclaim its birthright. They were waiting for a leader strong enough, charismatic enough, and daring enough to challenge the mighty Snake Kingdom and awaken the sleeping giant. That leader would eventually emerge in the late 7th century. A king named Joso Chan Kayawilai. His story, a tale of incredible comeback and sweet revenge, is a chapter for another day. But his rise was only possible because of the century of silence that preceded it. The great defeat of 562 was not the end of Tikal. Instead, it was a crucible, a period of trial by fire that tested the city's resilience. It was a humiliating setback that forced the city to regroup and rebuild its strength in the shadows. The hiatus was a long, dark night for Tikal, but as we all know, the dawn always follows. The silence was eventually broken, and when Tikal spoke again, its roar would shake the foundations of the Maya world once more. Thanks for joining us on this journey back in time. If you're fascinated by the epic rivalries of the ancient Maya, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into this incredible civilization. We'll see you in the next chapter of history. History often zooms in on the clash of swords and the grand strategies of generals. But what about the lives unfolding in the shadows of those epic conflicts? What was it like for the farmer, the builder, the family, just trying to survive. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the grand theater of war to look at the quiet, everyday struggles of ordinary people. This is life during wartime. Imagine you're a farmer. For generations, your family has worked this land. You know its rhythms, the turn of the seasons, the feel of the soil. But now, war has come. It's not a cavalry charge through your fields, at least not yet. It's a quiet, creeping dread. The first thing you notice is the tribute. The lord, the king, the empire, they all need resources to fuel their armies. Suddenly, the grain you were saving for your family, the livestock you were raising to sell at the market, is no longer yours. Tax collectors, backed by soldiers, arrive with new, heavier demands. They don't care if your harvest was poor or if a sickness swept through your flock. The war effort requires its share, and that share keeps growing. You give them what they ask, because what choice do you have? You watch as months of your hard labor are carted away. You look at your children, and you have to calculate, night after night, if the food you have left will be enough to see them through the winter. This isn't a dramatic battle, but it's a fight for survival, waged at your own dinner table. And it's not just food. Armies need people. One day, a proclamation is read in the village square. The king needs men, not just soldiers, but laborers. If you're a stonemason, a carpenter, or just a strong young man, you might be conscripted. You're not being sent to the front lines to fight, but you are being taken from your home, from your family, from your own work. You're marched 4 miles to a distant location to build. What are you building? Fortifications to protect a city you've never seen. Roads for armies to march upon. Barracks to house soldiers. The work is backbreaking. The hours are long, and the conditions are often brutal. You're paid little, if anything at all. Your life is now dictated by the needs of a war you have no say in. Back home, your family struggles without you. Your spouse takes on your chores. Your fields may lie fallow, and the roof you are planning to mend before winter now has a gaping hole. The war is stealing your present and jeopardizing your family's future without you ever lifting a sword. For those left behind in the villages and towns, a different kind of anxiety takes hold. Fear becomes a constant companion. It's in the rumors that travel from town to town, whispered at the market or by the well. The enemy is just 2 valleys away. Did you hear what they did to the people of Oakhaven? You don't know what's true and what's exaggerated, but the uncertainty is terrifying. Every approaching stranger on the road, every unfamiliar noise at night, sends a jolt of panic through you. Is it a messenger? A deserter? An enemy scout? Or just a traveler who has lost their way? You teach your children to be quiet, to be invisible. You plan escape routes in your mind, wondering where you would go, what you could possibly carry. You live in a state of suspended animation, caught between your normal life and the potential for it to be shattered in an instant. 'Tis constant low-grade terror wears you down, fraying your nerves and stealing your peace. It's a psychological siege that can be just as damaging as a physical one. And then there's the simple, grinding reality of daily survival. Everything becomes harder. The roads, once safe for merchants, are now plagued by bandits or controlled by military checkpoints. This means goods become scarce and prices skyrocket. A simple needle, a bug of salt, a pair of shoes, things you once took for granted are now luxury. You learn to make do, to mend, to patch, to stretch every resource to its absolute limit. The social fabric of your community starts to fray. People you've known your whole life become suspicious of one another. Who is hoarding food? Who might be a collaborator, feeding information to the enemy in exchange for safety or a little extra grain? The trust that once bound your village together is replaced by a guarded watchfulness. Every interaction is colored by the stress and desperation of the times. Friendships are tested, and sometimes they break under the strain. Even moments of joy are tinged with sadness. A wedding is celebrated with a smaller feast, overshadowed by the absence of loved ones who are away at war or who have been lost. A new baby is born, and as you look at this tiny, innocent life, your heart aches with the fear of the world you've brought them into. You try to create a bubble of normalcy for your children, to shield them from the ugliness. But you know they see it. They hear the hushed, anxious conversations. They feel the tension in the air. This is the untold story of war. It's not fought with banners and trumpets, but in empty pantries and worried glances. It's the silent sacrifice of a mother giving her own meager portion of bread to her child. It's the lonely toil of a craftsman forced to build for an army far from home. It's the gnawing fear of a family listening for footsteps in the night. The grand chronicles of history might forget these people, but their quiet struggles, their resilience, and their desperate hope to simply endure are the true bedrock of the human story during wartime. The battles may end, and the kings and generals may sign their treaties, but for the ordinary people, the war's impact lingers. It lives on in the empty chairs at the table, in the fields that take years to recover, in the communities that have to learn how to trust each other again. Theirs is not a story of glory, but of endurance, and it's a story that's repeated time and time again in every conflict throughout history. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this perspective on history interesting, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. We love exploring the past from every angle. Let us know in the comments what other hidden aspects of history you'd like us to cover next. Until then, stay curious. Hello and welcome back to our journey through the Maya world. Today, we're venturing south to the lush river valley of Copan in modern-day Honduras. This isn't just another Maya city. It's a place of incredible art, intense ambition, and ultimately, a story of struggle that echoes through its silent stones. For centuries, Copan was a major power in the southeastern Maya lowlands. Its story begins with a figure named Kainashyax Kukumo, or Soon-Eyed Resplendent Quetzalmaca. What a name, right? He arrived in Copan around 426 AD, a charismatic outsider, possibly from the great city of Teotihuacan, or Tikal, and founded a dynasty that would rule for nearly 400 years. The early rulers of Copan were builders and diplomats. They established their city as a cultural and political center, its influence radiating outwards. They constructed magnificent plazas, temples, and stone monuments carved with the portraits and stories of their kings. This is where Copan truly shines. The sculptors here were masters of their craft, carving figures in such high relief that they almost leap out from the stone, creating a three-dimensional realism unmatched in the Maya world. The city became known as the Athens of the Maya world for its artistic and intellectual achievements. One of the most incredible sources we have from Copan is the hieroglyphic stairway. This is the longest known text from the ancient Maya civilization, with over 2,000 glyphs detailing the history of the Copan dynasty. It's a stone staircase leading up a massive temple, and each step is a chapter in the city's royal saga. It tells us about the founder, his successors, their triumphs, and their ceremonies. For years, the rulers of Copan enjoyed a golden age. The kingdom expanded, the population grew, and the art flourished. They controlled key trade routes, particularly for precious resources like jade and obsidian, which further cemented their power. Their relationship with the nearby city of Quirigua seemed to be that of a dominant power and its subordinate vassal. The king of Copan was the overlord, but this relationship of dominance was about to be shattered. This brings us to the most pivotal and dramatic moment in Copanese history. In the 8th century, the 13th ruler of Copan, a king named Uaxtlajuan Aboa Kewilet, Wagalet, Kawilalet. He was one of Copan's greatest patrons of the arts. Under his reign, the city's sculpture reached its absolute zenith. He commissioned magnificent stelae that depicted him in the full, glorious regalia of a divine king. He seemed invincible, a ruler at the peak of his power, overseeing a vibrant and prosperous city. He was preparing for a major ritual, one that would celebrate his long and successful reign and further solidify his divine authority. But trouble was brewing just 80 kilometers to the north. The ruler of Quirigua, a man named Caiktili Chanyopot, or Coaxsky, had ambitions of his own. He was nominally a vassal of 18 Rabbit, but he wasn't content with that role. He saw an opportunity to break free. It's believed that Calakmul may have forged a powerful alliance with the mighty kingdom of Calakmul, the sworn enemy of Tikal, Copen's traditional ally. With the backing of a superpower, Calakmul made his move. In the year 738 AD, in a shocking turn of events, the forces of Quirigua captured the great King 18 Rabbit. The details of the battle are scarce, but the outcome was catastrophic, for Copen 18 Rabbit was taken to Quirigua, and in a public ritual, he was sacrificed. Imagine the shock and horror that must have ripped through their divine king, their powerful ruler. The man whose face was carved into stone all across the city had been captured and executed by a supposed vassal. It was a profound humiliation and a political disaster. The divine mandate of the Copen dynasty was shattered. How could their king be all-powerful if he could be defeated and killed so disgracefully? This event sent the kingdom into a tailspin. For the next 2 decades, all major construction at Copen ceased. No new monuments were raised. There was a palpable sense of crisis and a loss of confidence. The city entered a period of silence, a hiatus that speaks volumes about the trauma it endured. The successor to 18 Rabbit, Kak, Joplachan, Kaowil, or Smoke Monkey, had the unenviable task of trying to pick up the pieces. His reign was short and seemingly unstable. It wasn't until the 10th ruler, Kak, Yipiaj, Chan, Kaowil, or Smokeshell, that Copen began to show signs of recovery. He was a skilled diplomat and strategist who worked tirelessly to restore his city's prestige. He completed the magnificent hieroglyphic stairway, a monumental effort to re-legitimize the dynasty by literally setting its glorious history in stone for all to see. It was a powerful statement of resilience, an attempt to say, we are still here. Our history is long and glorious, and this defeat does not define us. But the world had changed. While Copen slowly recovered its footing, it never regained its former regional dominance. The defeat at the hands of Quirigua had irrevocably weakened its position. Other nearby centers began to assert their own independence. The political landscape of the southeastern region had fractured. The final rulers of Copen, like the famous Yak's Passage Chan Yopat, the 16th king, continued to build and commission artworks. His own tomb is a masterpiece of sculpture, depicting him presiding over a council of his ancestors, a final, poignant attempt to connect with the glories of the past. But the writing was on the wall. The city's population had grown too large for the surrounding valley to support. Environmental degradation, deforestation, and soil erosion likely led to food shortages and social unrest. The strain of supporting a large, non-producing elite class, coupled with the political instability and environmental pressures, proved to be too much. By the early 9th century, the authority of the divine king was crumbling. The last dated monument at Copen is from 822 AD. After that, the royal court collapses. The grand palaces and temples were abandoned, and squatters moved into the ceremonial plazas, building crude huts and leaving behind their household rubbish. The great city of Copen, the Athens of the Maya, slowly faded back into the jungle. The story of Copen is a powerful lesson in the fragility of power. It shows how personal ambition, dynastic pride, and unforeseen military defeats can alter the course of history. It's a story of artistic brilliance born from royal power, but also of how that power, once challenged, can lead to a kingdom's slow and agonizing decline. The silent stones of Copen don't just tell a story of kings and battles. They tell a human story of ambition, loss, and the struggle to endure against all odds. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the dramatic history of Copen. It is a truly fascinating site with a story that's both inspiring and tragic. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more Maya history, and ring that bell so you don't miss our next chapter. See you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the ancient Maya world. Today, we're venturing deep into the lush jungle-covered hills of Chiapas, Mexico, to uncover the story of a city that embodies resilience, rebirth, and artistic genius. Palenque. Its story isn't just one of steady growth. It's a dramatic saga of devastating defeat and a spectacular comeback. A real-life tale of a kingdom rising from the ashes. Imagine a powerful city, a beacon of culture and influence, suddenly brought to its knees. That's exactly what happened to Palenque in the late 6th and early 7th centuries. In 599 AD, and again in 611 AD, Palenque suffered crushing defeats at the hands of its powerful rival, Calakmul, the formidable head of the Snake Kingdom. These weren't just minor skirmishes. They were catastrophic events. The city was sacked, its sacred monuments were likely desecrated, and its dynasty was thrown into chaos. Inscriptions from this time speak of a dark time for Palenque, a period of humiliation and political turmoil. For many city-states in the Maya world, a blow like this would have been the end. But not for Palenque. This is where their story gets truly remarkable. The turning point came in 615 AD, with the accession of a new ruler, a 12-year-old boy who would become one of the most famous figures in all of Maya history. Kainish Janab Tikal, or Tikal the Great. His reign, lasting an incredible 68 years, would not just halt Palenque's decline, it would launch the city into its golden age. Tikal's mother, Lady Sakkuku, served as regent in his early years, a powerful woman who stabilized the kingdom and paved the way for her son's long and prosperous rule. She was a crucial figure, ensuring the royal lineage continued and that Palenque had the steady leadership it desperately needed to begin the slow process of recovery. So, how did they do it? How did Tikal and his successors turn a defeated city into a regional powerhouse? It was a masterful combination of careful diplomacy, strategic warfare, and an explosion of artistic and architectural expression that served as powerful propaganda. Tikal understood that to rebuild, Palenque couldn't just fight its way back to the top. It needed to project an image of strength, legitimacy, and divine favor. And the primary way to do that was through building. The heart of Tikal's project was the transformation of the city's ceremonial center. He initiated the construction of some of the most elegant and sophisticated buildings in the entire Maya world. The palace, a sprawling complex of courtyards, galleries, and residential quarters, was greatly expanded under his rule. Its most iconic feature, the 4-story observation tower, still stands as a testament to the city's renewed confidence, reaching for the sky. But Tikal's most enduring legacy is his own tomb, the Temple of the Inscriptions. This magnificent stepped pyramid is more than just a burial place. It's a narrative in stone. Its walls are covered in one of the longest hieroglyphic texts ever discovered from the Maya civilization, meticulously detailing the history of Palenque's dynasty and legitimizing Tikal's own claim to the throne. It was a clear message to rivals and subjects alike. Palenque's royal line is ancient, divinely sanctioned, and here to stay. When Tikal died at the age of 80, the throne passed to his capable sons, Kinichkan Balam II and later Kinichkan Joy Chitam II. They continued their father's work with gusto, not just building, but actively rewriting the narrative of Palenque's earlier humiliations. Kambalam II, in particular, was a prolific builder. He commissioned the stunning Cross Group, a trio of temples: the Temple of the Cross, the Temple of the Foliated Cross, and the Temple of the Sun. Each temple is a masterpiece of design, featuring delicate roof combs and intricate interior panels. These panels don't shy away from Palenque's past. Instead, they reframe it. They depict Kambalam, the second own accession ceremonies, and connect his rule directly to the actions of the gods and the founding of the dynasty, effectively papering over the recent defeats and emphasizing continuity and divine right. The art of Palenque during this golden age is simply breathtaking. The sculptors developed a unique style characterized by a naturalistic and graceful depiction of the human form. The stucco portraits and reliefs found throughout the city are some of the finest examples of Maya art. They're not stiff or generic. They're filled with life and personality, capturing the subtle expressions of rulers and gods. This wasn't just art for art's sake. It was a political tool. By creating such beautiful and sophisticated works, Palenque was broadcasting its cultural superiority and its wealth. It was a visual declaration that this was a city blessed by the gods, led by powerful kings, and once again a force to be reckoned with. Of course, art and architecture alone weren't enough. Palenque also engaged in strategic warfare to reassert its dominance. Under Tikal and his sons, Palenque's military ventured out, capturing rival lords and securing control over key trade routes. They didn't necessarily try to take on the superpower of Calakmul directly again, but instead focused on chipping away at its network of allies, weakening their great rival piece by piece. These victories were, of course, immortalized in stone back home, with new inscriptions celebrating the capture of enemy nobles, further bolstering the image of a revitalized and powerful kingdom. The combination of military success and a brilliant propaganda campaign in the form of art and architecture was a winning formula. The story of Palenque is a profound lesson in the art of recovery. It shows us that a kingdom's power was unjust measured in the number of soldiers it could field, but in its ability to control its own story. Tikal and his successors understood this perfectly. They used every tool at their disposal: diplomacy, war, but most memorably, art healed their city's wounds, restore its pride, and build a legacy that would outlast their empire. When you look at the elegant towers and detailed reliefs of Palenque today, you're not just seeing beautiful ruins. You're re-seeing the physical manifestation of a kingdom's iron will to survive and flourish against all odds. It's a testament to the power of leadership, vision, and the enduring human drive to create beauty even in the wake of destruction. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of Palenque's incredible story. It's a powerful reminder that history is full of amazing comebacks. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the ancient world. Let me know in the comments what you find most fascinating about Palenque's recovery. See you next time. Ever wonder if a wedding could change the world? Well, in history, it often did. Welcome back to our channel, where today we're diving deep into the fascinating world of royal women, marriage, and high-stakes political strategy. Forget what you think you know about fairy tale weddings. For queens, princesses, and noble women, marriage wasn't just about love, it was about power, peace, and sometimes war. These women were the ultimate diplomats, the living, breathing treaties that could bind entire nations together or tear them apart. Let's explore how these incredible women navigated their complex roles and shaped the course of history. Imagine being a young princess, told from birth that your marriage will decide the fate of your kingdom. This was the reality for countless royal women. Their unions weren't personal choices. They were strategic moves on a grand political chessboard. A well-placed marriage could secure a crucial alliance, bringing together two powerful families, or even two rival nations. For example, when a princess from France married a king of England, it wasn't just a union of two people. It was a bridge between two often warring countries, a promise of cooperation, trade, and mutual support. These marriages were celebrated with lavish feasts and ceremonies, not just to honor the couple, but to publicly display the new bond between their realms. The wedding itself was a political statement, a spectacle for all to see that a new era of friendship had begun. These alliances weren't just symbolic. Had real-world consequences. A marriage could bring an end to decades of brutal warfare. Instead of sending thousands of soldiers to die on the battlefield, a king could send his daughter to marry the enemy's son. This act created a familial tie, making future conflict much more complicated. How could you wage war against your own son-in-law, your own grandchildren's kingdom? It was a powerful deterrent. We see this time and again from the Habsburgs in Europe, who famously used the motto, "Let others wage war. You, happy Austria, marry," to the intricate marriage networks of ancient Egypt. These women were peacemakers, their vows echoing across battlefields and bringing silence where there was once the clash of swords. Their personal sacrifices bought stability and prosperity for their people. Of course, just as a marriage could forge peace, it could also ignite the flames of war. A broken betrothal could be seen as a grave insult, a dishonor that had to be answered with force. If a king rejected a princess he was promised to, her family might see it as a public humiliation and a breach of trust, leading them to declare war. Succession crises were another major flashpoint. When a king died without a clear male heir, his daughter's husband, often a foreign prince or king, might suddenly claim the throne in his wife's name. This could lead to bloody civil wars or international conflicts, as different factions and foreign powers backed different claimants. The War of the Roses in England and the War of the Spanish Succession are classic examples of how claims through a female line could plunge entire continents into chaos. A princess's hand in marriage was a prize that could be worth fighting and dying for. Beyond being bargaining chips, royal women wielded a unique and potent form of political power through their bloodlines. They were the carriers of legitimacy. In many cultures, the right to rule was passed down through specific family lines, and women were the essential links in that chain. A king's marriage to a woman from a revered and ancient lineage could bolster his own, sometimes shaky, claim to the throne. It legitimized his rule in the eyes of the nobility and the common people. This is why conquering kings often married women from the very royal families they had just defeated. By doing so, they absorbed the old dynasty's legitimacy into their new one, smoothing the transition of power and reducing the chance of rebellion. The children of such unions represented a fusion of the old and the new, a symbol of a unified future. Once married and installed as queen or a high-ranking noblewoman, a woman's political role was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. As a queen consort, she was the highest-ranking woman in the kingdom and held immense influence. She was the king's closest advisor, the one person who could speak to him with a level of intimacy no one else could. A savvy queen could use this position to advocate for her home country's interests, acting as a permanent ambassador at court. She could influence policy, promote cultural exchange, and place her allies in positions of power. She was also the mistress of the royal court, a social and cultural hub where political maneuvering was constant. By controlling who had access to the king and shaping the court's atmosphere, a queen could subtly direct the flow of power. Furthermore, queens often served as regents, ruling the kingdom in their own right when their husbands were away at war or if their sons were too young to take the throne. This was their chance to exercise direct political authority. Queens like Isabella of Castile, Catherine the Great of Russia, and Elizabeth I of England, who ruled as queen regnant, are legendary figures who proved that women could be just as capable, if not more so, than their male counterparts. They led armies, passed laws, and oversaw periods of incredible growth and prosperity. Even as regents, queens like Catherine de' Medici of France held the fate of the nation in their hands, navigating treacherous political waters to protect their children's inheritance and maintain stability. These women shattered the illusion that power was an exclusively male domain. The influence of these women also extended to their children. As mothers to future kings and queens, they were responsible for their education and upbringing. They instilled in them the values, political leanings, and cultural affinities that would shape their reigns. A queen could raise her son to be favorable to her homeland, ensuring that the alliance she embodied would continue into the next generation. She would teach her daughters how to navigate the complexities of court life and prepare them for their own strategic marriages. This maternal influence was a long-term political strategy, a way of shaping the future of entire dynasties. Through their children, the political and cultural legacy of these royal women could echo for centuries. So, the next time you hear a story about a princess marrying a prince, remember the bigger picture. These women were not passive figures in a romantic tale. They were astute politicians, diplomats, and power brokers who stood at the center of international relations. Their marriages were the threads that wove the complex tapestry of history, linking cities, ending wars, and determining the fate of empires. They carried the weight of their kingdoms on their shoulders, using their bloodlines, their influence, and their intelligence to navigate a world dominated by men. Their stories are a powerful reminder that history was shaped by both kings and queens, and the strategic eye-do was often as mighty as the sharpest sword. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found this fascinating, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you and miss our next exploration into the hidden corners of history. See you next time. Have you ever wondered what happened after the intense battles of the ancient Maya? It wasn't just a sigh of relief and a return home. Victory was a profound spiritual event, a cosmic rebalancing that demanded elaborate and often grim ceremonies. So, what did a Maya victory celebration actually look like? Stick around, because it's a story of gods, kings, and blood. For the Maya warfare wasn't just about conquering land or resources. It was a sacred duty. Battles were seen as earthly reenactments of mythic struggles between the gods. A king's victory wasn't just his own. It was a victory for his city as patron deities, and a confirmation of his divine right to rule. Losing was a sign of divine disfavor, but winning meant the cosmos was in order, and the gods were pleased. This belief set the stage for everything that followed. The moment the battle ended, the next phase began. High-ranking Captive's enemy, kings, lords, and elite warriors, were the ultimate prize. They weren't just prisoners of war, they were offerings destined for the gods. These captives would be paraded back to the victorious city, their humiliation a key part of the public spectacle. Imagine the scene: the triumphant king, adorned in his finest regalia, leading a procession of his warriors. Behind them, stripped of their own finery, were the captured elites, bound and defeated. This wasn't just a show of force. It was a powerful piece of political and religious theater for everyone to see. Once back in the city's ceremonial center, the rituals would begin. These weren't quiet, somber affairs. They were grand, public spectacles held in the main plaza, surrounded by towering pyramids and temples. The air would be thick with the smoke of copal incense, the rhythmic beat of drums, and the sound of trumpets. Dancers, wearing elaborate costumes of feathers, jaguar pelts, and jade, would perform ritual dances, reenacting scenes from the battle and mythological stories. These dances were a way to communicate with the gods and to integrate the victory into the sacred narrative of the city. A central element of these ceremonies was blood. The victorious king and his nobles would perforate their own bodies, ears, or other sensitive areas using sharp objects like obsidian blades or stingray spines. This act of self-sacrifice was a way to give thanks to the gods and to nourish them with their own life force. They believed that blood was a conduit to the supernatural world, and by offering it, they opened a portal for communication with deities and ancestors. The blood would be collected on paper and burned, the rising smoke carrying their prayers to the heavens. But the most dramatic part of the ceremony was reserved for the captives. The fate of these high-status prisoners was sacrifice. While lower-ranking soldiers might become laborers, the captured lords faced a ritual death. There were various methods, but one of the most common depicted in Maya art is decapitation. Sometimes this would happen after the captive was forced to play a ritual ballgame, a reenactment of their defeat where the outcome was already decided. Other times, the sacrifice would take place at the top of a pyramid, the captive's heart offered to the gods. This might sound brutal to us, but for the Maya, it was a necessary transaction. The sacrifice of a noble captive was the ultimate offering, a debt paid to the gods who had granted them victory. It was believed to ensure the continued fertility of the land, the rising of the sun, and the overall balance of the universe. The captive's death wasn't seen as murder, but as a sacred transformation, a final, crucial role in a cosmic drama. Their life force was being transferred to the gods and, by extension, to the victorious community. To make sure these victories were never forgotten, the Maya were masterly. The events of the battle and the subsequent rituals were painstakingly carved into stone. They erected magnificent stone monuments called stelae, which are like giant stone billboards. These stelae would feature portraits of the king in his warrior aspect, often standing over a humbled, bound captive. Intricate hieroglyphic texts would detail the date of the battle, the name of the enemy city, the name of the captive, and the rituals that took place. These monuments were placed in public plazas for all to see. They were permanent declarations of the king's power and his special relationship with the gods. Every time someone walked past a stela, they were reminded of their city's strength and their ruler's divine mandate. Temples, stairways, and even ball court markers were also adorned with carvings depicting these victory scenes. The entire city became a living monument to its military and spiritual triumphs. The famous hieroglyphic stairway at Copan, for instance, is the longest known Maya text, detailing the history of the city's dynasty, including its military conquests. So, for the ancient Maya, the end of a battle was just the beginning of a complex series of sacred events. Victory wasn't just celebrated, it was consecrated. Through public parades, ritual dances, acts of bloodletting, and the ultimate sacrifice of their enemies. They reaffirmed their place in the cosmos, and by carving these stories into stone, they ensured that their divinely sanctioned victories would echo through eternity. It's a fascinating, if sometimes unsettling, look at how politics, religion, and warfare were completely intertwined in their worldview. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into Maya history. If you found this interesting, hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the ancient world. Let me know in the comments what other aspects of Maya civilization you'd like to learn about. See you next time. Today, we're diving deep into a sobering reality of history, a theme that echoes from ancient battlefields to modern headlines. The endless cycle of conflict, We often imagine history as a series of clear-cut wars with winners and losers, where victory parades signal the end of bloodshed and the dawn of a new era of peace. But the truth is far more complex and often much darker. This is Chapter 16, The Endless Cycle of Conflict. Let's travel back to ancient Greece, a land of brilliant philosophers and artists, but also a cauldron of constant warfare. The Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta is a perfect case study. For nearly 3 decades, these two superpowers and their allies tore the Greek world apart. When Athens finally surrendered in 404 BCE, you might think peace finally descended. Sparta had won. The war was over. But was it? The reality was that Sparta's victory simply created a new power vacuum and a new set of grievances. The so-called peace was anything but peaceful. Sparta, now the dominant power, imposed its will across Greece, installing oligarchies known as the 30 Tyrants in Athens and other cities. This wasn't liberation, it was subjugation under a new master. The Athenians, stripped of their democracy and pride, didn't just accept their fate. The desire for revenge began to smolder. Within a year, Athenian exiles, Regroped, launched a counter-revolution and overthrew the tyrants, restoring their democracy. The seeds of the next conflict were already sown. This is the first part of the cycle. Victory breeds resentment. The defeated party rarely disappears. They remember their loss, their humiliation, and the injustices inflicted upon them. Their children are raised on stories of past glory and present suffering, and the desire for retribution becomes a core part of their identity. Peace treaties become mere ceasefires, temporary pauses while the vanquished lick their wounds and gather their strength for the next round. Now, let's look at how alliances shift, adding another layer of complexity. Before the Peloponnesian War, many Greek city-states, like Corinth and Thebes, were Sparta's allies, united by their fear of Athenian expansion. But once Athens was defeated, the common enemy was gone. Suddenly, Sparta's dominance became the new threat. Old friends became new rivals. Just a few years after Athens' defeat, Sparta found itself at war with its former allies, including Thebes, Corinth, and even Persia, who had previously funded the Spartan fleet. Athens, their bitter enemy from yesterday, now joined the coalition against Sparta. This is the second part of the cycle. Alliances are fluid and based on self. Yesterday's enemy can become today's ally in the face of a new, greater threat. This constant reshuffling of the deck meant that no single victory could ever be final. A win today could easily lead to a coalition of resentful losers and fearful former friends ganging up on you tomorrow. The goal of warfare shifted from achieving lasting peace to simply maintaining a temporary advantage in a perpetually unstable world. Let's turn to another giant of the ancient world, Rome. Rome's rise to dominance is a story of relentless conquest. They were masters of war. But did their victories bring peace? The Punic Wars against Carthage are a brutal example. After the Second Punic War, where Hannibal famously crossed the Alps and terrorized Italy, Rome imposed a devastating peace treaty on Carthage. Carthage was stripped of its territories, its navy was dismantled, and it was forced to pay a massive indemnity. They were forbidden from waging war without Rome's permission. For 50 years, a fragile peace held. But in Rome, the memory of Hannibal's threat lingered. A powerful political faction, led by Cato the Elder, ended every speech, no matter the topic, with the same chilling phrase, Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. They saw Carthage's slow economic recovery not as a sign of a peaceful neighbor, but as a future threat brewing. They weren't interested in peace. They were interested in total annihilation to prevent any possibility of a future challenge. This fear, this paranoia born from a previous conflict, led to the Third Punic War. It was a war of choice for Rome, a war to finish the job. The result was the complete destruction of the city of Carthage. Its fields were metaphorically sown with salt, and its people were killed or sold into slavery. This illustrates the third, and perhaps most tragic, part of the cycle. The trauma of war fuels future conflict. The fear and hatred generated by one war don't just vanish when the fighting stops. They become ingrained in a society's culture and politics. Leaders can exploit this fear to justify further aggression, arguing that preemptive strikes are necessary to prevent a repeat of past horrors. The war becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The fear of another war is the very thing that starts it. This cycle wasn't unique to Greece or Rome. Look at the successor states after the death of Alexander the Great. His generals, who had fought side by side as comrades to conquer the known world, immediately turned on each other. Their grand alliance shattered into a multi-generational, free-for-all war for a piece of the empire. A victory for one general, like Ptolemy in Egypt or Seleucus in Asia, was just a temporary gain. It meant they now had to defend their new kingdom from the ambitions of their former friends. Alliances were made and broken in the blink of an eye. Marriages were arranged to seal treaties, only to have those same families at war a few years later. The conflict was passed down from father to son, a grim inheritance of endless struggle for a prize that was constantly shrinking and fragmenting. So, what does this teach us? It shows that victory on the battlefield is rarely the end of the story. Without addressing the root causes of conflicted grievances, the fear, the desire for power, the cycle is doomed to repeat. A treaty signed by generals designed to raise the hatred in a soldier's heart or the hunger in a citizen's belly. A defeated city doesn't forget its pride, and a rising power will always be seen as a threat by its neighbors. This endless cycle is a core dynamic of human history. The peace that follows one war is often just the prelude to the next. The lines are redrawn, the players change, but the game remains brutally the same. Each conflict plants the seeds of its successor, growing in a field fertilized by revenge, fear, and shifting ambitions. Understanding this cycle is crucial, not to become cynical, but to appreciate how incredibly difficult it is to achieve a true and lasting peace. It requires more than just military victory. It requires reconciliation, justice, and a fundamental shift in how former enemies view one another. A lesson that, even today, we are still struggling to learn. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this exploration of history's cycles interesting, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the past. Let us know in the comments what other historical patterns you'd like us to explore. Until next time, stay curious. Hello and welcome back to our series where we dive deep into the forces that shaped human history. Today, we're tackling Chapter 17, Environmental Stress and Rising Tensions. It's a story about how the world around us, the very ground beneath our feet, can push societies to their absolute breaking point. Imagine a world where the rains stop coming, not just for a season, but for years, even decades. Fields that once fed thousands turn to dust. Rivers that provided life-giving water shrink to mere trickles. This isn't a dystopian fantasy. It was a harsh reality for many ancient civilizations. We're talking about megadroughts, prolonged periods of extreme aridity that could destabilize entire regions. Historical and archaeological records are filled with evidence of these climate catastrophes. Take the Late Bronze Age collapse, for instance. Around 1200 BC, powerful empires across the eastern Mediterranean, like the Hittites and the Mycenaeans, suddenly crumbled. For a long time, historians debated the causes, pointing to invasions or economic failures. But more and more, climate data, gathered from things like tree rings and sediment cores, paints a picture of a severe, century-long drought. When the agricultural base of a society withers, everything built upon it, the economy, the political structure, the military, starts to teeter. This wasn't just a one-time event. The classic Maya civilization in Mesoamerica experienced a similar fate. Their magnificent cities, with their towering pyramids and complex social systems, were largely abandoned between the 8th and 9th centuries. Again, the culprit seems to be a series of devastating droughts. When the water disappeared, so did the power of the ruling elites, who were often seen as intermediaries to the gods, responsible for ensuring bountiful harvests. When the rains failed, faith in the rulers failed too, leading to social unraveling and conflict. But drought was just one piece of the puzzle. The other critical factor was population pressure. Over centuries, many societies had experienced significant growth. More people meant a greater demand for everything: food, water, land, and timber. In times of plenty, this growth was sustainable. Advanced agricultural techniques, like irrigation, could support larger populations. Cities swelled, and cultures flourished. But this growth created a hidden vulnerability. Think of it like stretching a rubber band. As the population grew, the rubber band was stretched tighter and tighter. The system was efficient, but it had very little slack. When a major environmental shock like a prolonged drought hit, the rubber band didn't just loosen, it snapped. There was no surplus to fall back on. The very systems designed to support a large population, like extensive irrigation canals, became useless without water to fill them. This lethal combination of a growing population and shrinking resources created a pressure cooker environment. What happens when a city of 50,000 people suddenly can't feed itself? Or when neighboring a kingdom's water source dries up, and they look over the hill to see your river is still flowing? The answer, time and again, throughout history, is conflict. This is where we see a dramatic shift in the nature of warfare. Before, conflicts might have been about dynastic succession, honor, or limited territorial gains. But when a society is facing existential threat from starvation and thirst, the nature of war changes. It becomes desperate. It becomes a zero-sum game. The goal was no longer just to defeat an enemy's army on the battlefield. It was to seize their resources. Armies would march with the explicit goal of capturing grain stores, securing water sources, or taking over fertile land. The conflicts became more brutal, more total. This wasn't about glory. It was about survival. The losers didn't just face subjugation. They faced annihilation. Their people would be displaced, starve, or be absorbed by the victors. We can see this in the archaeological record. Fortifications around cities became more massive and complex. We find evidence of settlements being violently destroyed and burned, their inhabitants massacred. The stakes were higher than ever before. Neighboring groups who might have coexisted or traded peacefully for generations were suddenly pitted against each other in a life-or-death struggle. Let's consider the example of the ancestral Pueblones. In the American Southwest, around the 13th century, they faced a combination of severe drought and social pressures. For centuries, they had built incredible cliff dwellings and sophisticated communities. But as the climate turned against them, evidence of violence skyrockets. Archaeologists have found unburied bodies, evidence of cannibalism in some extreme cases, and entire villages that were abandoned, likely due to a mix of starvation and warfare. They were competing for the last remaining pockets of arable land and water. This pattern repeats across the globe. In ancient China, the cycle of dynasties was often tied to the environment. Periods of political instability and widespread warfare frequently coincided with times of flood or drought, which led to peasant rebellions and opportunistic warlords vying for control of the dwindling food supply. The mandate of heaven, the philosophical concept that granted a ruler the right to rule, was often seen as being lost when the state could no longer prevent famine and chaos. A natural disaster was interpreted as a sign that the heavens were displeased, giving rivals a justification to rise up and fight for control. It's crucial to understand that the environment wasn't a deterministic force. It didn't automatically mean that drought equals war. Human choice, culture, and political organization played a huge role. Some societies were more resilient than others. Those with flexible social structures, diverse food sources, or the ability to migrate were better able to adapt. For example, nomadic or semi-nomadic peoples were often more resilient to localized environmental shocks than sedentary agricultural societies, because they could simply move to greener pastures. However, for a large, complex, urbanized civilization, moving wasn't an option. Their entire existence was tied to a specific place. Their investment in infrastructure, their cultural identity, it was all rooted in one location. When that location became unlivable, their options were limited. Adapt, conquer, or collapse. The competition for resources also spurred innovation, but often in a military context. Better weapons, stronger walls, and more cunning strategies were developed out of necessity. But these innovations only escalated the cycle of violence. A stronger wall built by one city would prompt its rival to develop siege engines to tear it down. This era of heightened environmental stress shows us that the line between civilization and chaos can be incredibly thin. The systems that allow us to live together in large numbers are often dependent on a stable and predictable environment. When that stability is removed, the social contracts that hold societies together can fray and break. The competition for basic necessities can override long-standing alliances, moral codes, and cultural norms. So, as we look back at Chapter 17, we see a world on edge. The pressures of climate change, resource scarcity, and population growth created a perfect storm. It didn't just lead to a few extra battles. It fundamentally changed the reasons people fought and the brutality with which they did so. War became less about politics and more about sheer survival, a desperate scramble for the dwindling resources on a planet that seemed to be turning against its inhabitants. It's a sobering lesson from our past, and one that highlights the profound and often brutal connection between humanity and the environment we depend on. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through a pivotal and challenging chapter of human history. I hope this gives you a new perspective on the ancient world. If you found this interesting, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. See you next time. Welcome back to our series on Mesoamerican history. Today, we're diving into Chapter 18, the fragmentation of power, a period that dramatically reshaped the political landscape during the late Classic era. Imagine a world dominated by a few towering giants, massive city-states, whose influence stretched for hundreds of miles. Now, picture those giants beginning to stumble. That's exactly what happened. For centuries, superpowers like Teotihuacan in central Mexico and the great Maya kingdoms of Tikal and Calakmul in the south had held sway. They controlled vast trade networks, commanded powerful armies, and their cultural influence was immense. But no empire lasts forever. In the 7th and 8th centuries, the foundations of these colossal powers began to crack. Let's start with Teotihuacan. This metropolis, one of the largest cities in the world at its peak, had been a dominant force for half a millennium. Its decline wasn't a single, dramatic event, but a gradual process. We see evidence of internal strife, possibly a great fire that destroyed key administrative and religious buildings around the year 650. This wasn't an outside invasion, but looks more like an internal uprising or civil war. As the central authority in Teotihuacan crumbled, its grip on its far-flung territories loosened. The vital trade routes it once policed became insecure, and the flow of goods like obsidian, jade, and cacao was disrupted. The giant was no longer able to project its power, and a massive power vacuum opened up across central Mexico. Meanwhile, in the Maya lowlands, a similar story was unfolding, but with its own unique flavor. The long-running rivalry between the two superpowers, Tikal and Calakmul, known as the conflict of the snake and jaguar kingdoms, had defined the classic Maya world. This wasn't just a war between two cities. It was a continental struggle, with each superpower vying for the loyalty of smaller cities, creating two massive spheres of influence. They fought epic battles, captured kings, and their conflict shaped the destiny of dozens of other cities. But this constant warfare, spanning generations, was incredibly costly. It drained resources, manpower, and political capital. By the late 7th century, both Tikal and Calakmul showed signs of exhaustion. While Tikal experienced a resurgence under a powerful ruler, Jasau Kawi Eli, who defeated Calakmul in 695. It was a Pyrrhic victory. Calakmul was severely weakened, but Tikal never regained the absolute dominance it once had. The stalemate had been broken, but the result wasn't one winner, but two weakened giants. This weakening at the top created a golden opportunity for the little guys. All those smaller city-states that had been forced to pay tribute and pledge allegiance to either Tikal or Calakmul began to see their chance. Cities like Copan, Palenque, Yaxchilan, and Duspila, which had long been secondary players, started to flex their own muscles. They had their own ambitious rulers, their own noble lineages, and they were tired of living in someone else's shadow. So, what did they do? They asserted their independence. We see this very clearly in the archaeological record. These smaller cities began constructing their own monumental architecture on a grand scale, something that was previously the hallmark of the superpowers. They started carving intricate steely stone monuments that didn't just mention their allegiance to a greater king, but glorified their own rulers and their own local dynasties. These stelae became a form of political propaganda, declaring, "We are in charge here now." The art and writing from this period explodes in diversity and local style, reflecting this newfound autonomy. This declaration of independence wasn't just symbolic. These newly empowered city-states began to forge their own alliances and pursue their own political agendas. The simple, bipolar world of Tikal versus Calakmul fractured into a complex, multipolar system. Think of it like a game of Risk where two players have dominated the board, but suddenly their armies are depleted and a dozen other players who've been quietly building up their strength all decide to make a move at once. The result: chaos. The nature of warfare changed dramatically. Instead of massive, set-piece battles between superpowers, conflict became more localized, more frequent, and arguably more brutal. The focus shifted from capturing territory to capturing people, particularly elites, for tribute, labor, or sacrifice. Fortifications, once rare in the Maya heartland, began to appear around cities, a clear sign that the threat of attack was now a constant, everyday concern. The inscriptions from this time are filled with records of raids, ambushes, and skirmishes. Between neighboring cities, the war was no longer happening far away on a distant battlefield. It was right on their doorstep. This period is often called the balkanization of the Maya world. The political map, once dominated by large colored blocks, now looked like a shattered mosaic of dozens of tiny, competing kingdoms. While this fragmentation led to a flowering of art and culture, in many of these newly independent cities, some of the most beautiful Maya art comes from this period of intense competition. It also created a state of endemic warfare. This constant conflict had severe consequences. It disrupted agriculture, as farmers were afraid to tend fields that might be raided. It shattered trade networks that had been in place for centuries, making it harder to get essential goods. It placed an enormous strain on the population, who had to support not only their own local king's ambitions, but also defend against their neighbors. The political instability was immense. A city might be powerful one decade, and a vassal state the next. This era of fragmentation was the prelude to the so-called classic Maya collapse, the weakening of the central powers. The rise of countless competing cities and the resulting endemic warfare created a system that was fundamentally unstable. It was a house of cards, and while it was beautiful and complex, it was also incredibly fragile. The pressures mounting from this constant conflict, combined with environmental factors like drought, would eventually prove to be too much. The political order that had defined the classic period was tearing itself apart, paving the way for one of the most mysterious and debated events in ancient history. Next time, we'll explore that very collapse and investigate what happens when the lights go out across the Maya world. Thanks for watching, and if you're enjoying this journey through history, make sure to like and subscribe for more. See you in the next chapter. Welcome back to our journey through Maya history. Today, in Chapter 19, we're exploring the end of an era. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. We're looking at the last recorded wars, etched in stone. For centuries, Maya kings documented their triumphs on stele, those magnificent stone monuments that have told us so much. They carved detailed accounts of battles, captured lords, and political dominance. These inscriptions were the headlines of their time, a powerful way to project strength and legitimize rule. But as we move into the 9th and early 10th centuries, something changes. The once prolific records of warfare start to fade. Let's travel to the city of Tonina, in what is now Chiapas, Mexico. Tonina was a fierce and aggressive power, known for its conflicts with its rival, Palenque. One of the very last dated monuments from the classic Maya period is found here. It's Monument 158, and it commemorates a victory. It shows a captive, stripped of his finery, bound and humbled. The date on this monument corresponds to the year 909 AD. Think about that for a moment. After centuries of detailed chronicles across the Maya world, this is one of the final declarations of military victory we have. It's a powerful final statement from a kingdom that thrived on conflict. Similarly, in Cibel, a city in the Petén region of Guatemala, we see a fascinating and brief resurgence. After a period of decline, Cibel was reoccupied, and new monuments were erected. Stele dating to around 849 AD are intriguing because they show figures with a mix of classic Maya and foreign, possibly Central Mexican, influences. The inscriptions speak of a Cayatan lord, a ruler who presides over a 20-year cycle. They mention arrivals and rituals, hinting at a new political order established through military might. But this revival was short-lived. The inscriptions at Cibel, like those at Tonina, represent a final burst of royal proclamation before the tradition of erecting such monuments largely ceased in the southern lowlands. What's so striking isn't a single, dramatic inscription that says, "The end, there's no final stela." detailing a cataclysmic battle that brought the world to its knees. Instead, the story of the end of classic Maya warfare is told through silence. After around 909 AD, the kings in the southern lowlands simply stopped commissioning these grand stone records. The quarries fell silent. The sculptors laid down their tools. The written history of war, so central to Maya royal identity for so long, just stops. Why did this happen? It's the great mystery of the Maya collapse. It wasn't one single event. It was a complex process that varied from region to region. The political system that supported these kings and their wars was crumbling. Environmental stress, prolonged droughts, and internal strife likely weakened the authority of the rulers. A king who couldn't guarantee a good harvest or protect his people lost his divine mandate. If you don't have the resources, the political power, or the workforce, you can't commission a 10-foot-tall monument to your glory. The cessation of steely erection wasn't the cause of the collapse, but a symptom of it. The powerful machinery of the state was breaking down. Imagine being a scribe or a sculptor in a city like Tikal or Calakmul in the late 9th century. For generations, your family's purpose was to carve the king's legacy into stone for eternity. But now, the kingdom is struggling. The population is dwindling. The king's authority is questioned. There are no more grand victories to celebrate, or perhaps no one left with the power to command their recording. The tradition, passed down for centuries, simply ends with your generation. It's a quiet, personal, and profound end to a grand historical narrative. This is fundamentally different from how we often imagine societal collapses. We think of a final, epic battle, a city burning to the ground. But the archaeological and epigraphic records from the Maya southern lowlands suggest something more gradual. The institution of divine kingship, which was the primary driver of large-scale warfare and its documentation, slowly unraveled. The focus shifted away from interkingdom rivalries to more localized struggles for basic survival. The grand political game that had been played out on Stele for centuries was over. It's crucial to remember that this was not the end of the Maya people. Far from it. In the northern Yucatan, cities like Chichen Itza and Miopan were thriving, developing new political systems and styles of art and architecture. Life went on, but the specific tradition of classic Maya kingship, with its emphasis on dynastic history and recorded warfare on stone monuments in the southern lowlands, came to a quiet close. The last recorded wars weren't followed by a grand finale, but by the fading echo of a civilization transforming itself. The story wasn't over, but this particular way of telling it was. The stone had fallen silent. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the final stone records of Maya warfare. It's a fascinating look at how history can end, not in fire, but in silence. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more chapters in our exploration of the past. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we step into a world of echoes and shadows. Into Chapter 20, Abandoned Cities and Silent Temples. Imagine, for a moment, the vibrant heart of a once mighty civilization beginning to fade. This isn't a sudden cataclysm, no single, devastating blow, but a slow, creeping silence that falls over bustling avenues and grand plazas. We begin in the sprawling urban centers that were the pride of their empires. Picture towering pyramids and intricately carved palaces, their stone facades once gleaming under the sun. For generations, these cities were magnets for humanity, drawing in artisans, traders, priests, and kings. The air hummed with the energy of thousands of lives, the sounds of market chatter, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the solemn chants from temple courtyards. These were the centers of power, of knowledge, of existence itself. But something begins to change. The reasons are complex, a tapestry woven from many threads. Perhaps the surrounding fields, overworked for centuries, can no longer feed the swelling population. Maybe a prolonged drought sears the landscape, turning rivers into trickles and reservoirs into cracked earth. The vital trade routes that were the city's arteries might have shifted, choked off by rival powers or simply fading into irrelevance. As new centers of commerce emerge elsewhere, Disease, unseen and relentless, could have swept through the crowded districts, leaving fear and loss in its wake. The first signs are subtle. A few families, driven by hunger or uncertainty, pack their meager belongings and slip away in the pre-dawn light, heading for more fertile lands, for smaller, more resilient villages. At first, their absence is barely noticed. An empty house here, a shuttered workshop there. But then, the trickle becomes a stream. More follow, seeking stability away from the increasingly fragile city. The grand plazas, once thronged with people for festivals and ceremonies, start to feel cavernous. The echoes of footsteps seem louder now. Children's laughter no longer spills from every corner. The great markets, which once overflowed with exotic goods from distant lands, stayed. Obsidian, brilliant feathers, and rich textiles now have empty stalls. The vibrant tapestry of commerce begins to fray, and as the people leave, nature, ever patient, begins its reclamation. A single seed, carried by the wind or a bird, finds a crack in the stone floor of a royal courtyard. It sprouts, its roots, tiny yet persistent, push against the meticulously laid flagstones. Soon, a tuft of green becomes a patch of weeds, then a hardy shrub. Vines, like green fingers, start to crawl up the walls of the palaces, probing for weaknesses, covering the elaborate carvings of gods and kings. The great palaces themselves, once home to powerful rulers in their courts, fall silent. The throne room, where decisions that shaped the lives of millions were made, is now just a large, empty chamber. Dust settles on the royal dais. A breeze whispers through the vacant halls, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves instead of incense and royal feasts. The colorful murals depicting heroic battles and divine lineage begin to flake and fade, their stories slowly being erased by humidity and time. The ghosts of power and prestige linger, but the substance is gone. In the temples, the fires on the altars have long since gone out. The priests, who once interpreted the will of the gods and guided the spiritual life of the city, have departed. Who is left to make the offerings, to read the celestial calendars, to perform the sacred rituals? The inner sanctums, once forbidden to all but the highest initiates, are now open to the elements. Rain drips through cracks in the roof, pooling on floors where only the most sacred ceremonies took place. The faces of stone deities, once objects of profound reverence, are now streaked with moss and lichen, their expressions rendered ambiguous by the patient work of nature. They watch over a congregation that has vanished. The jungle, which had been held at bay for centuries by the city's sheer presence, now advances with renewed vigor. Its advance is not a frontal assault, but a slow, inexorable siege. Tree roots, as thick as pythons, buckled the foundations of buildings, toppling walls that had stood for ages. The canopy of massive trees extends over the city, casting the once sun-drenched avenues into a perpetual green twilight. The sounds of the city, the voices, the music, the industry are replaced by the sounds of the jungle. The guttural calls of howler monkeys reverberate where royal decrees were once read. The chatter of parrots replaces the gossip of the marketplace. The hum of insects is the new, constant rhythm of this place. Plazas become clearings in the forest. Streets become winding jungle paths. The ball courts, where athletes once played for life and glory, are now overgrown. The stone rings obscured by a tangle of roots and vines. It's a slow, quiet conquest. Not of armies, but of life itself, returning to reclaim its dominion. And what of the people? They do not vanish from the earth. Instead, they disperse. The complex, hierarchical society of the city breaks down into smaller, more self-sufficient units. Populations scatter across the landscape, returning to a simpler way of life, one more in tune with the rhythms of the land. They form new villages in more sustainable locations, near reliable water sources and fertile soil. The grand, centralized state collapses, but the culture survives, albeit in a different form. The memory of the great city lives on in their stories, their myths, their oral traditions, a tale of a golden age, a lost paradise. Warfare, once a grand affair of organized armies clashing for territory and tribute, also changes. The large-scale conflicts that were fought to sustain the city's dominance fade away. With the central power gone, the motivation for such massive campaigns evaporates. Strife may continue, but it becomes more localized. Small-scale skirmishes between neighboring villages over resources, rather than epic battles between kingdoms. The silent cities are no longer prizes to be won. They are monuments to a bygone era, and so the city is left to its slumber. It is no longer a place of the living, but it is not dead. It has become a different kind of ecosystem, a sanctuary for wildlife, a living ruin where stone and forest are locked in a slow, timeless embrace. The silence is not one of emptiness, but of reverence. It is the silence of a library after closing, the silence of a cathedral long after the service has ended. It's a place of profound peace, where the frantic pulse of human ambition has finally given way to the steady, enduring heartbeat of the earth. This process of abandonment and reclamation has happened time and again throughout human history, all across the globe. From the Maya cities of Central America to Angkor Wat in Cambodia. These silent metropolises stand as powerful reminders of the impermanence of even the greatest human achievements. They teach us that civilization is a delicate balance, and that nature's patience will always outlast our own. As we conclude our exploration of these abandoned cities and silent temples, we are left with a sense of awe and humility. We see the crumbling stones not as a sign of failure, but as a testament to the resilience of both humanity and the natural world. The people moved on, adapted, and survived. The jungle returned, creating a hauntingly beautiful landscape where the past is always present. Thank you for joining me on this quiet walk through a world reclaimed by time. What we learn from these silent stones echoes into our own era, reminding us to consider the legacy we are building and the world we will one day leave behind. If you found this journey as fascinating as I did, please like, subscribe, and join us for our next chapter. Until then, keep exploring. Have you ever heard about the mysterious disappearance of the Maya civilization? You've probably seen images of ancient, vine-covered temples rising out of the dense jungle, creating this romantic idea of a great empire that just vanished without a trace. It's a compelling story, one that has fueled countless documentaries and adventure movies. But what if I told you that story is fundamentally wrong? What if the Maya never really disappeared at all? Today, we're going to unravel this popular myth and discover the incredible story of Maya resilience. A story of what the wars and turmoil truly destroyed, and more importantly, what they didn't. Let's set the scene. We're talking about the end of the Classic period, roughly from the 8th to the 9th century AD. This was the golden age for many great Maya city-states in the southern lowlands. Places like Tikal, Calakmul, and Palenque. These were bustling urban centers, home to tens of thousands of people, with towering pyramids, sophisticated art, and advanced knowledge of astronomy and mathematics. But then, something dramatic happened. Archaeologists call it the Classic Maya Collapse. Over a period of about 150 years, these magnificent cities were gradually abandoned. Construction of monuments stopped, royal dynasties ended, and the jungle began to reclaim what had been meticulously built over centuries. So, what caused this collapse? For a long time, people looked for a single, dramatic answer. Was it a massive plague? A foreign invasion? Maybe even something otherworldly? The reality, as archaeologists now understand it, is far more complex, and in many ways, more interesting. It wasn't one single event, but a perfect storm of interconnected problems. One of the biggest culprits was intense, prolonged warfare. The great city-states were locked in a constant power struggle. Inscriptions on stone monuments were steely, telltales of epic battles, captured kings, and shifting alliances. This constant conflict was incredibly draining. It exhausted resources, disrupted trade routes, and took a heavy toll on the population. Think about it. Every farmer called to fight is one less person growing food. Every resource spent on weapons is one less resource for building reservoirs or temples. Compounding the problem of warfare was a series of severe, prolonged droughts. Scientists have studied lakebed sediments and cave formations in the region, and the data is clear. The 9th and 10th centuries saw some of the most intense dry spells in thousands of years. For a civilization dependent on agriculture, this was catastrophic. Less rain meant crop failures. Crop failures meant widespread famine and malnutrition. This, in turn, would have fueled social unrest and made people question the authority of their divine kings, who were supposed to guarantee prosperity and appease the gods. So you have a deadly combination. political instability from endless wars, and environmental catastrophe from climate change. These factors fed into each other, creating a downward spiral from which many of the southern cities could not recover. The system of divine kingship, the political glue that held these city-states together, fractured and broke. The people, facing starvation and violence, simply voted with their feet. They left. This is the point where the disappearance myth takes hold. Because the great stone cities were abandoned, people assumed the entire civilization just vanished. But that's like saying Roman culture disappeared when the city of Rome fell. It's simply not true. What collapsed was a specific political system in a specific region, the southern lowlands. The Maya people didn't vanish into thin air. They moved. They adapted. They survived. So where did they go? Many migrated north, to the Yucatan Peninsula. And here's the fascinating part. While the southern cities were declining, new Maya cities in the north were rising and flourishing. Places like Chichén Itzá and Tlatelolco became the new centers of Maya power and culture. Life was different here. The political structure changed, art styles evolved, and there were new influences from other Mesoamerican cultures, but it was undeniably Maya. They continued to use their complex writing system, tracked time with their sophisticated calendars, and worshipped their traditional gods. Even as new deities were incorporated, the ball game was still played. Trade networks were re-established. The Maya world was not gone. Its center of gravity had just shifted. Even after these northern cities also declined centuries later, the Maya people endured. They reorganized into smaller, more decentralized kingdoms and communities. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they didn't find an empty jungle. They found a vibrant, resilient, and fiercely independent Maya population that fought back against colonization for centuries. The last independent Maya kingdom, Najbit, located on an island in Lake Patan, Isa, didn't fall to the Spanish until 1697. Nearly 800 years after the collapse of the classic southern cities, this brings us to the most important point. The Maya are still here. Today, millions of people who identify as Maya live in Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. They speak dozens of distinct Mayan languages. They practice traditions that blend ancient beliefs with Catholicism, a testament to their incredible ability to adapt and preserve their identity. In many communities, the ancient farming techniques are still used. Weavers create textiles with patterns that have been passed down for generations. The stories, the ceremonies, and the deep connection to the land all continue. The Maya culture is not a museum piece. It is a living, breathing, and evolving tradition. So, when we talk about the collapse, what was really lost? What was destroyed were the great royal courts of the classic period and the political system of divine kingship that supported them. The massive stone cities of the south fell silent, their grand plazas and pyramids left to the jungle. The specific lifestyle of the urban elite, with their intricate rituals and monumental construction projects, came to an end in that region. But the Maya people, their languages, their core beliefs, their knowledge, and their spirit of survival that was never destroyed. They adapted to new political realities, new environments, and even foreign conquest. They carried the essence of their culture forward, weaving it into the fabric of the modern world. The story of the Maya is not one of a mysterious disappearance. It's a powerful story of resilience, adaptation, and cultural continuity against all odds. It reminds us that cities can fall and empires can crumble, but people and their culture can endure. The jungle may have reclaimed the stones of Tikal, but it never swallowed the Maya spirit. So the next time you hear about the lost Maya civilization, you'll know the truth. They were never lost. They're still here. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey to debunk one of history's greatest myths. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history, and share this video to help set the record straight. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. For centuries, the Maya civilization was seen as a peaceful society of astronomers and priests living in serene jungle cities. But what if I told you that this image was completely wrong? That beneath the veneer of tranquil temples and stargazing, there was a world of brutal warfare, political intrigue, and dynastic ambition. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of how modern archaeologists and epigraphers cracked the Maya code and uncovered a history written in blood and stone. Imagine walking through the ruins of Tikal or Calakmul. You see towering pyramids and intricate stone carvings. For a long time, scholars thought these carvings, these hieroglyphs, were purely symbolic, depicting gods, myths, or astronomical events. They believed the Maya had no written history, no record of kings and queens, let alone wars. This all began to change in the mid-20th century. A key breakthrough came from a Russian linguist named Yuri Norizov. While others were stuck on the idea that each glyph represented a whole word, Norizov proposed something radical. The glyphs were a mix of logograms, representing whole words, and phonetic syllables. He realized the Maya writing system was syllabic, much like modern Japanese. This was a game. Suddenly, the silent stones began to speak. Scholars like Tatiana Perskuryakov, an architect-turned-mechanist, started applying this new understanding. While studying the Stelia Pedras Negras, she noticed patterns. The dates on the monuments seemed to cluster around certain figures. She hypothesized that these weren't gods, but historical rulers. She identified birth dates, accession dates, when they took the throne, and even death dates. She had unlocked the biographies of kings and queens, turning myth into history. The era of seeing the Maya as anonymous priests was over. We were now meeting real, named individuals. With the ability to read the inscriptions, a much darker and more complex picture of Maya society emerged. The glyphs didn't just talk about peaceful rituals. They spoke of war, capture, and sacrifice. One of the most common and chilling verbs they deciphered was shaku, which means to chop or to axe. It was often followed by the name of a rival city or ruler. Another common phrase was chukai, meaning he was captured. These weren't poetic metaphors. These were stark records of military conflict. Archaeologists started looking at the evidence on the ground through this new lens. Take the Bonampak murals in Chiapas, Mexico. These vibrant, incredibly preserved paintings were once thought to depict a ceremonial celebration. But with the new understanding of the glyphs, the scenes took on a terrifying new meaning. We see a brutal battle in full swing. Warriors grabbing captives by the hair. In another scene, a victorious king stands over his humiliated prisoners on the steps of a pyramid. Their fingers are bleeding, their fingernails torn out, as they await their sacrificial doom. This wasn't a party. It was a graphic depiction of the aftermath of war. The very layout of Maya cities started to make more sense. Many sites, once thought to be open ceremonial centers, were revealed to have massive defensive walls, moats, and ramparts. For example, the city of Dos Pilas in Guatemala has a series of concentric walls built in a hurry, using stones ripped from temples and palaces. The inscriptions tell us why. The city was locked in a desperate, existential struggle with its larger neighbor. The archaeology and the writing told the same story of a city under siege. These wars weren't just small-scale raids. They were epic conflicts between superpowers. The greatest rivalry of the classic Maya period was between the city-states of Tikal and Calakmul, the so-called Snake Kingdom. For over a century, these two giants fought for dominance, creating vast networks of alliances and vassal states that stretched across the Maya world. We can track the ebb and flow of this massive geopolitical struggle through the inscriptions. We read about a Star War event, when Tikal's king was captured and likely sacrificed, leading to a period of Calakmul's dominance. Then, decades later, we read about Tikal's glorious revenge, when Hitskin Jasochang Kawilai defeated the Snake Kingdom and captured its divine effigy. His victory is immortalized on Temple I at Tikal, the grand pyramid that towers over the central plaza. Standing there, today you're looking at a war memorial. Even broken stones tell a story. In many cities, archaeologists find stelae carved stone monuments depicting rulers that have been intentionally smashed or defaced. This wasn't random vandalism. It was a political act. When one city conquered another, they would often destroy the monuments of the previous dynasty to literally erase their history and legitimacy. By piecing together these broken fragments, like a giant historical puzzle, researchers can reconstruct these moments of conquest and regime change. So, how did they do it? It's a combination of meticulous work, Epigraphers spend years poring over drawings and photographs of eroded glyphs, comparing them, cross-referencing them, slowly building up a dictionary of the ancient language. Archaeologists excavate city defenses, analyze trauma on human remains found in mass graves, and use technologies like LiDAR to map entire landscapes, revealing hidden fortresses and battlefields. They put the words of the glyphs into a physical context. The discovery of a mass grave confirms a written account of a battle. The mapping of a wall confirms a city's defensive posture described in a text. The story of the Maya is a powerful reminder that history is not static. It's a living discipline, constantly being revised and rewritten as new evidence comes to light. The peaceful stargazers of the past have been replaced by a far more realistic and human civilization, one filled with ambition, conflict, and a thirst for power. By learning to read their own words, we've given the ancient Maya their voice back. We've moved beyond romanticized visions and can now appreciate them for who they truly were. A complex, dynamic, and often violent society whose history is as dramatic and compelling as any in the ancient world. Thanks for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this fascinating, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the mysteries of history. See you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're journeying deep into the jungles of Mesoamerica, not just to marvel at the pyramids of Tikal or Palenque, but to understand the complex world of the ancient Maya. For centuries, we pictured them as peaceful astronomers, stargazers lost in celestial calculations. But the decipherment of their hieroglyphs has unveiled a much more intricate and, frankly, more human story. It's a story of dozens of city-states, each a kingdom in its own right, locked in a dance of diplomacy, rivalry, and conflict. The wars of the Maya city-states offer us a fascinating mirror, reflecting timeless questions about power, ambition, and the very nature of human civilization. So, what were these wars about? It wasn't always about conquering vast territories in the way we might think of the Roman Empire. Often, the goals were more symbolic, yet incredibly potent. One of the primary drivers was the capture of rival elites, especially the king, the Kawalaja, or Holy Lord. This wasn't just about removing a piece from the chessboard. Capturing an enemy king was a profound spiritual and political statement. It demonstrated that your patron gods were more powerful than theirs. The captive might be ritually humiliated or sacrificed, a public spectacle that transferred their sacred power, their spiritual essence, to the big. It was a cosmic coup, a way of asserting legitimacy not just on the battlefield, but in the eyes of the gods. Imagine the impact on the morale of the defeated city. Their divine connection was severed. Their king, the conduit to the sacred, was gone. It was a blow to their very identity. This brings us to the idea of legitimacy. For a Maya ruler, legitimacy wasn't just inherited. It had to be constantly performed and proven. Military victory was a key part of this performance. A successful war leader was seen as favored by the gods, a strong and capable protector of his people. Stele, those incredible carved stone monuments we see across Maya sites, aren't just art, they are propaganda. They depict kings towering over bound captives, listing their military triumphs in intricate glyphs. These were public declarations of power, meant to be read by the literate elite and understood by all. Look, they proclaimed, I am a mighty ruler. I have captured the lord of a rival city. The gods are with me. Our kingdom is strong. Building grand temples and bowl courts was one part of the equation, but demonstrating martial prowess was another, equally vital, way to secure your right to rule. The rivalries between city-states could span generations, creating long-lasting webs of alliances and enmities. The classic example is the centuries-long struggle between Tikal and Calakmul, the two superpowers of the classic Maya period. This wasn't just a two-player game. They each drew smaller, neighboring cities into their orbits, creating vast spheres of influence that waxed and waned like the moon. A smaller city like Dos Pilas might be allied with Tikal, then get conquered by Calakmul, and be forced to switch its allegiance, even fighting against its former allies. The political landscape was incredibly fluid. These alliances were cemented through strategic marriages, trade agreements, and, of course, the threat of military force. It was a delicate, an often deadly balancing act. The rise of one city often meant the decline of another, a zero-sum game played out over centuries across the Petén Basin. Interestingly, the style of warfare itself seems to have evolved over time. In the early Classic period, conflicts might have been more ritualized, focused on those high-value captures we talked about. But as we move into the late Classic period, around the 7th and 8th centuries, the evidence points to something more destructive. We start to see fortifications being built around cities. Iconography shows cities burning. Archaeological evidence reveals layers of destruction. It suggests that the objectives shifted from capturing kings to perhaps disrupting trade routes, controlling valuable resources like jade or obsidian, or even wiping out a rival dynasty entirely. This escalation in violence is a key part of the debate surrounding the so-called Maya collapse, where, in the southern lowlands, cities were gradually abandoned. Was this endemic warfare a cause, or merely a symptom of a system under stress from drought, overpopulation, and political instability? The answer is likely a complex mix of all these factors. And what can we, in our modern world, take from this ancient drama? It's not about drawing simple, one-to-one parallels. Rather, it's about recognizing patterns of human behavior that echo through the ages. The struggle for legitimacy, the way rulers use spectacle and success to justify their power. Does that not sound familiar? We may not carve our victories on stone steely, but we broadcast them through our own media, crafting narratives of strength and success. The delicate dance of international relations, forming alliances, competing for resources and influence. The rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul feels like a microcosm of geopolitical struggles throughout history. It's a reminder that beneath the unique cultural trappings of any society, whether it's ancient Maya or 21st century global, lie fundamental human drivers. The quest for security, the ambition for prestige, and the complex relationship between cooperation and conflict. The Maya didn't have a single, unified empire. Their political fragmentation was their reality, and in that, they show us one of many ways to organize a civilization. It was a system that fostered incredible artistic and intellectual achievement, but also contained the seeds of its own instability. Their history serves as a powerful case study, a complex and nuanced story written in stone and glyphs. It challenges us to look beyond simplistic narratives and appreciate the intricate, often contradictory, forces that shape human societies. The echoes of their struggles in the jungle are not just a story about the past. They are a reflection on the enduring themes that continue to shape our world today. The names and places change, the technologies evolve, but the fundamental questions of power, rivalry, and the pursuit of a legacy seem to be a constant part of the human journey. Thanks so much for joining me on this exploration of Maya history. It's a subject that just gets more fascinating the deeper you go. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more journeys into the past. Let me know in the comments what ancient civilization you'd like to explore next. Until then, stay curious. And so, we arrive at the final chapter of our journey. Chapter 24. A quiet ending beneath the stars. For months, we've walked through the echoes of a civilization that rose from the jungle floor, touched to the heavens, and then was consumed by conflict and time itself. We have stood in the shadow of its grandest monuments and sifted through the dust of its forgotten cities. We've traced the lineage of kings, decoded the silent language of stone, and felt the thunder of armies that shook these very grounds. We began our story in the heart of a bustling, vibrant empire, a world teeming with life, ambition, and color. We witnessed the birth of a dynasty, the construction of temples that were marvels of engineering and devotion. We saw how art, science, and spirituality intertwined to create a culture of unparalleled sophistication. The markets were alive with the sounds of 100 different tongues. The fields were golden with harvests, and the causeways connected a kingdom that seemed destined for eternity. But as with all great empires, shadows began to lengthen. We delved into the complexities of royal succession, the subtle shifts in power that would ultimately lead to civil. We followed the story of two brothers, princes born to the same legacy, whose ambitions set the kingdom on a path of division and strife. The conflict was not a sudden storm, but a slow, creeping decay that poisoned the heart of the empire from within. We walked the battlefields, now reclaimed by twisting vines and the roots of ancient trees. We imagined the clash of obsidian-tipped spears, the cries of warriors, and the desperate prayers whispered to the gods as brother fought against brother. The great cities, once symbols of unity and strength, became fortresses. The sacred temples, built for worship, became strategic high ground. The cost was immeasurable, not just in lives lost, but in the fracturing of a shared identity. The very soul of the civilization was torn asunder. Through inscriptions and archaeological findings, we pieced together the final, tragic acts of this grand drama. We saw cities abandoned, their populations fleeing the endless warfare. We saw monuments defaced, not by foreign invaders, but by their own people, in acts of political and religious fury. The jungle, always patient, began its slow reclamation. The roar of the jaguar replaced the orders of generals. The call of the howler monkey echoed where royal pronouncements once did. The end did not come with a single, cataclysmic event. It was a slow, quiet fading. The wars exhausted the people, the land, and the spirit. The great stone cities, once the center of the world, became ghost towns. The knowledge accumulated over centuries was scattered. The intricate social fabric unraveled until only threads remained. It was a quiet surrender not to an enemy army, but to the entropy of conflict and the relentless embrace of nature. And that brings us here, to this moment. Look. Before us lies the final scene. The moon, a silent, silver witness, hangs high in the velvet sky. Its gentle light pours down like a benediction, bathing the ruins in a soft, ethereal glow. The stones, once sharp and proud, are now softened by moss, their edges worn smooth by 1,000 rainy seasons. The great plazas, where thousands once gathered in ceremony, are now carpets of grass, glistening with dew. There are no more armies here. The shouts of war have long since faded, replaced by the symphony of the night-jungled chirping of crickets, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. The air is still and cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine. Everything is at peace. The great conflict is over. The jungle rests. These temples are no longer just structures of stone. They are monuments to silence. They are the final words of a long and complex story. Each crumbling wall, each toppled stele, is a testament to both the heights of human achievement and the depths of our capacity for self-destruction. But they are not just symbols of an end. They are also symbols of endurance. They have survived the wars. They have survived the collapse. They have survived the centuries of neglect. They remain. Beneath this canopy of stars, history itself lies sleeping. It's not gone. It's simply waiting. Waiting for the moonlight to reveal its form. Waiting for a curious mind to ask a question. Waiting for a quiet moment, like this one, to be remembered. The story we have told is not just about a lost civilization. It is a universal story. It's about the cycles of creation and destruction, of peace and conflict, that define the human experience. It's a reminder that even the mightiest empires can fall, and that in the end, it is the quiet, persistent forces of nature and time that have the final say. But it is also a story of hope, because even in the deepest silence, the echoes remain. The memory persists in the stones. The spirit of the people who built this place, who lived and loved and fought and dreamed here, is not entirely extinguished. It lives on in these ruins, a quiet whisper beneath the stars. As we stand here in this profound tranquility, we realize the journey's true purpose. It was not just to chronicle a war or to document a collapse. It was to find this moment of peace at the end of it all. To understand that after all the noise and fury, silence and stillness eventually return. The earth heals, the jungle reclaims, and history waits patiently for us to listen. This is the quiet ending. A final, peaceful image of ruined temples under the moonlight, a testament to all that was, and a reminder of the enduring power of memory. The wars are over, the jungle rests, and the story, etched in stone and starlight, is here forever, waiting. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. It has been an honor to share it with you. If these stories have moved you, if the whispers of the past have reached you, then our exploration has been a success. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to uncover the forgotten chapters of our world together. Until next time, stay curious.